Cool. Good morning. I'm calling to order the meeting of the Portland City Council for the morning of Wednesday, February 4th. Will you please call the roll?
Good morning. Avalos.
Here.
Smith.
Here.
Canal. Fertile Guinea.
Here.
Ryan.
Here, I will be online today. Thanks, everyone. Don't want to spread germs.
Koyamaline.
Here.
Mario.
Here.
Novick.
Here.
Clark.
Here.
Green.
Here.
Zimmerman.
Here.
Dunphy.
Here. Good morning, everybody. Please please note Councillor Canal is here as well. Hi. Colleagues, first thing on the our agenda is agenda approval. Are there any requests to amend? And can we please read the rules of decorum? Thank you. Good flag.
Welcome to the Portland City Council. To testify before council in person or virtually, you must sign up in advance on the council agenda at www.portland.gov/council/agenda. Information on engaging with council can be found on the council clerk's webpage. Individuals may testify for 3 minutes unless the presiding officer states otherwise. Your microphone will be muted when your time is over. The presiding officer preserves order. Disruptive conduct such as shouting, refusing to conclude your testimony when your time is up, or interrupting others' testimony or council deliberations will not be allowed. If you cause a disruption, a warning will be given. Further disruption will result in ejection from the meeting. Anyone who fails to leave once ejected is subject to arrest for trespass. Additionally, council may take a short recess and reconvene virtually. Your testimony should address a matter being considered. When testifying, state your name for the record. Your address is not necessary. If you are a lobbyist, identify the organization you represent. Virtual testifiers should unmute themselves when the council clerk calls your name. Thank you.
Thank you. I will note that some items have been pulled from the consent agenda and have been moved to be read after item 11. Are there any other changes to the order of the agenda? Okay, do I have unanimous consent to approve the agenda? Seeing happy little nods, the agenda is approved. Keelan, could you please call public communications?
First up, we have Jim Rice.
Welcome, Jim. Please introduce yourself for the record.
My name is Jim Rice. Council members, amazing, caring citizens. Small businesses are the culture soul of Portland, and we are at risk of losing it. I'm a small business owner who survived the pandemic, riots, and being burglarized 15 times. But we are now entering our darkest time. Over the last 3 years, I've watched over 100 businesses with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of jobs leaving our neighborhood, most like REI, stating safety, homeless, and crime as the primary reasons. Others failed because people stopped coming to Portland. The inconvenient truth is 43% of small businesses here in Portland are losing money, not including those marginally in the black. That's over 10,900 businesses that are on the ropes, potentially impacting 70 to 100,000 employees. 25,000 jobs have been lost in the past year and a lot more to come. We are now ranked in the top 10 worst places for business survival. We are fighting to make payroll for our teams, desperately trying to survive while fighting against cascading taxes, crime, shocking homeless issues, and inflation. I'm meeting with business owners across the city. All of them have horrific stories. 67% have been hit by crime in the past year, unmanageable homeless issues, lack of 911 response, and the feeling that we are totally on our own and no one seems to care. I, like many, have stopped reporting crimes as it's a waste of time. Police don't have the capacity. We have half the police officers of an average city. Many owners I'm meeting with are talking about leaving Oregon. I'm watching streams of regular customers leaving every week, not for the suburbs, but leaving the state. They too have given up on our government's ability to fix our problems. Businesses leaving, citizens leaving, jobs leaving, tax revenue leaving. Your $67 million financial gap is just the beginning. Though I understand you found $21 million in the couch cushions, you may want to look under all the cushions because the coming years are going to be worse. Portland has started the death spiral. Soon, you're not going to be able to stop it. You are presented with a lot of issues. This is extremely serious. Counselors, are you focused on fixing the issues causing your financial problems while saving the soul of our city? Ask yourselves, what would a small business or investor, why would they want to stay? Why would a small business want to stay? What are you doing to be able to help small businesses survive? What will be the impact to your budget and Portland when these businesses continue to fail? Truly, the future of Portland is in your hands. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Jesse Akins.
Hi, good morning, Portland. I am Jesse Akins. I'm a disabled veteran
Hey, Jesse, we are having a hard time hearing you.
Oh, I had a feeling you would say that because.
Sorry, friend.
How is that? Is that better?
Yes, much better.
Okay. Zoom is not optimized for me right now. Again, I'm Jesse Akins. I'm a Portland resident of District 3. I'm a disabled combat Army veteran. Get it all screwed up because of the volume. Thanks, volume. Anyways, I'm just here for a couple of short things. I was going to say some other things, but in regards to what happened at the protest over recently, where a lot of civilians were gassed and shot with pepper balls and things like that. I wasn't there. I'm disabled, like I said. Showing up to those kinds of things is very disastrous for my health when that sort of thing happens. I would love to show up at more protests for a variety of reasons. I can't because they're not safe for me. And many others, and it's far worse for many others. And the reason I bring this up is because we keep talking about the supremacy clause and the things that we can't do and the things that we can't do and the things that we can't do. But we don't talk about what we can do and what we have done in the past. And what I've personally seen in the past in our city and many others across the country is the police acting as a bulwark between hostile elements towards protesters. Normally, we've seen that in the cases of right-wing protesters being bulwarked against not right-wing protesters, neo-Nazis, white supremacists being bulwarked against others, aka the police with their backs towards the right wing and the neo-Nazis and the white supremacists, but not the other people. Why can't we do something like that? Police, they're not arresting, they're not engaging, they're simply acting as a bulwark between the people and the hostile entity. Hostile entity opens fire, where are the rounds going to go? Into police shields rather than children. Just a suggestion for our further deliberation on the subject. Something to consider, something to think about. And as a side note, I would like to say that the soul of Portland is not REI. That's just my opinion. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and we have some progress today. Thanks.
Thank you, Jesse.
Next up, we have Julie Winters. Julie Winters.
Hi there, folks. For the record, my name is Julie Winters. Some of you may have seen me before. Some of you may have not. I'm going to try and make this really quick. First question. Are you all required to review the PCCEP footage and the PCCEP listening sessions? Okay, just see a show of hands. If anyone did for the death of Damian Johnson. Anyone? Did any of you see that? Thank you, Ms. Lane. So, I'm not going to go over my story again because I've been posting the body cams of it for a year now. But to put it shortly, I was suffocated to death by 2 Portland police officers in a belly prone position a year ago, December 7th, 2024. I was shot with ketamine against my will. I was then brought to Legacy Emanuel, and I woke up with a Jane Doe tag around my wrist. They never gave me a lawyer. Then they dropped my charges 9 months later after not giving me my constitutionally protected right to a lawyer. I have 2.5 hours worth of body cams that prove that there's a cover-up. Somebody in DA's office messed up and gave me all of their internal affairs body cams too. 3 days after the PCCEP listening session, the DA dropped my charges. They charged me with assaulting the officer that hit me 17 times in the face, and then his trainee had me on the ground with my hands behind my back, and sat there until I was no longer breathing, didn't have a pulse, and didn't have any type of response at all. Between that time and the time that I woke up in the back of an AMR ambulance and begged I don't remember that time, but I woke up in the back of an ambulance with somebody trying to stick a needle in me, and I lost it. Now, then I woke up again after the ketamine started to wear off in Legacy Emmanuel with, I see that. But anyways, long story short, I wasn't a suspect in a crime. I was asking for help. I had broken an axle on my car, and your city public safety officer refused to call an ambulance because I mentioned that maybe the EMTs could check my cat out. But I also have my leg needed to be checked out too, but she decided because of my cat that she wasn't going to call an ambulance. I would really like to avoid a long and costly litigation process between all of you
Thank you so much
and
for being here.
and the chief of police, Bob Day, who acts like he doesn't know.
Thank you. Sorry, we have to.
I know, but it's very important. That's the thing. I've been writing to all of you over and over again for months now. I've gotten a response
Sorry.
from Councilor
Sorry.
Lane. and I've
Thank.
gotten a
We
response
have to move to the
Councilor-
next person. Unfortunately, I'm
Councilor
sorry.
Duncan. Please show respect to your constituents.
Thank you. I'm sorry, but we do have a time limit on here, and we're at 40 seconds over. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Portland police are
Next.
corrupt and complicit in the near murder of me and are still attempting to cover it up. DA Vasquez refiled the charges.
Next up, we have David Pearl.
And this is how I get treated. Duly noted.
Thank you for being here.
Portland police are corrupt as hell, and you guys won't do anything about any of it.
Name for the record, David Pearl. In the end, we will remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. Martin Luther King Jr. As we watch the Trump regime wreak havoc on Minneapolis, we must be ever vigilant in protecting our own people's lives and liberties. As the reality is, this is only the beginning, and these escalations and assaults on our rights and freedoms will only continue to get worse. However, our governor and mayor have continued in providing anything more than just lip service. Thousands of peaceful protesters, including children and seniors, were gassed by ICE just over the weekend. The immediate response was to create a council to create plans of attack with implementation by May 30th. This response is a direct admission by our elected leaders that they are clueless as to how to stop the federal government's overreach, which is particularly troubling as it was leaked that after Minneapolis, they are directing their assaults to our city of Portland. Our leaders must rise to the occasion and provide meaningful strategy of how to protect our city, not in 4 months, but today. While the lack of action is frustrating, it is anything but surprising. Historians have spent decades analyzing the question as to why people do not stand up against the forms of injustice we are seeing. The answer? They thought we were safe. They thought if they focused on their jobs, they were doing what was best for themselves and families, and that this would eventually pass. They were safe. They thought that their positions of power and influence was too important that nothing would happen to them. They were safe. They thought that if they aided their oppressors' causes, that they would be seen as one of the good ones. They were safe. As neighbors were removed from their homes and publicly assailed in the streets, clearly those targeted had done something wrong and deserved it. Couldn't be them. As judges and political opposition were stripped of their titles and replaced, trust in the system. And finally, when the ranks were purged of what the regime deemed useful idiots, they still desperately clung to the belief that this must be a mistake, that they had done nothing wrong, and that they were still safe. If you are anything but a white Christian male nationalist, you should be deeply concerned as to what is happening in our country. You are not safe, and we need everyone in our public office to be taking steps that proactively combat these escalations. We need immediate action and leadership, and we need it today. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here.
Next up, we have Addie Smith. Addie Smith. Okay, the alternate, Kenny Gonzalez.
Good morning.
Morning. Hi, my name is Kenny Gonzalez. I come here to review Section 1983, which allows us to sue anyone in any government playing role. And to that fact, I want to say before that ends up happening and affects every single one of you, help me in a way kind of establish the U.S. Code, 42 U.S. Code, Section 1983, due to the fact of Trump's policies are hurting all our young ones from having good, healthy food, since schools should provide healthy meals. It's a domino effect going on here, because if the kids can't go to school, that affects the parents coming to pick one of the two to stay home and watch the kids. And it as well affects bringing in money to support the house. So they make less. I have the rights under the city, which remains in a county, and goes into the county, is followed to the state, and so on, the domino effect again. As I bring back, our laws were put in play for the people, by the people. Trump has no right to sorry for my spelling, DEPRIBED, deprived the people from food or shelter, which due to the lack of making money, because money seems to hold more power and value than a human life or voice. Money talks more than humans. Some voices are shut out when it comes to money. Now we come back to the domino effect going on and needing to point out we are at war with Trump and the federal government, because Trump is acting as a terrorist. Thank you.
You have 30 more seconds if you need it, so.
Okay, and then I have here about the legislative, executive, and judicial branch, about starting a cycle with the ground form with 3 connectors are needed, but keep in mind, you only need 2 to form a cycle. So we have all 3, but the judicial branch wants to check the executive branch, but they need to check the legislative branch before jumping into the executive. That is all. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here this morning.
That completes communications.
Thank you. Colleagues, next on our agenda is the committee referral report. For colleagues and folks watching at home, my office has referred several items to committee last week, some of which have already been heard. Those items are listed on the committee referral report, which is available online at portland.gov/auditor/council-clerk/committee-referral-list. Keelan, can we please call item 4?
Item 4, time certain, add non-discrimination requirements for single occupant restrooms in places of public accommodation code to establish equal restroom access by requiring gender neutral signage. Add code section 23.01.071.
And colleagues, this is the first reading of an ordinance. We have Christopher Hare with us to give a staff summary report.
Thank you, and good morning, Council President, Council. For the record, Christopher Hare, Council Operations Policy Analyst, and reading on behalf of Craig Cook, who until recently staffed the Arts and Economy Committee. The ordinance document 2025-475 was considered in the Arts and Economy Committee on December 9th, where it was referred to council as amended with a recommendation to be passed as amended. The ordinance adds City Code Section 23.01.071 to require that single occupant restrooms in places of public accommodation be available for use by any person regardless of sex or gender identity, and that appropriate all-user signage be posted. It does not require the creation of new single-occupant restrooms or physical modifications to existing facilities. The city administrator is responsible for directing notice and enforcement with a recommended best practice of providing notice and sample compliant signage to applicable places of public accommodation in 2026. Noncompliance may be reported to code review through 311. Existing staff resources may be used to develop sample signage. Enforcement costs are undetermined and will depend on the enforcement approach. The ordinance directs that funding for applicable costs, including notification to affected businesses, be identified in the fiscal year 2026-27 city budget. The committee adopted an amendment prior to moving the item to full council. The effects of the amendment on the original ordinance are summarized in the committee staff summary posted online. The full impact statements on this item includes financial and budgetary impacts, economic and real estate impacts, community impacts, and community involvement. 2 individuals provided verbal testimony and 5 people submitted written testimony prior to committee action. General themes included importance of this policy for the LGBTQIA2S+ community and gender nonconforming individuals, importance of this policy for families with children, and using all user terminology in plain language so all members of the public can understand, importance of quality restrooms for customer impressions of businesses, restroom access as a matter of dignity and fairness, concerns about impacts on religious facilities that maintain separation of the sexes as a matter of religious belief. And this concludes the committee staff summary. Thank you.
Thank you, Christopher. This came out of Arts and Economy, so I do not recall if it was Councillor Green or Councillor Ryan who were in charge that day.
I don't remember either.
Fair enough. Councillor Ryan, I see your hand in that. Did you have, were you chairing this meeting, Councillor Ryan, when this came?
I can't recall that. I can recall this, though, and I think it'll be helpful. I learned the logic behind this actually from you, Councillor Dunphy, at that time, that was your title, in Arts and Economy. And it was confirmed this would not be a barrier, a big cost driver for small businesses. As you recall, that was most of my questions. And I appreciate that you went to great lengths to make this simple and not, let's just say, there weren't a lot of details that said you had to add this, and this that would cost X amount of money. And that was, I think, my concern with others. So I wanted to say I just appreciate Council President's passion for this issue. And I know that it started back when you were a staffer for Commissioner Fish, rest in peace. And I just think it's cool that you're seeing this to the finish line. I appreciate your dedication.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillors Purtle Guinea and Councillor and Koyama Lane are also co-sponsors on this. I want to give you each an opportunity to speak on this. Councillor Purtle Guinea.
Thank you, Council President, and thank you for bringing this policy forward and inviting us to co-sponsor it with you. Colleagues, when Councillor Dunphy approached me about this policy, we had a lot of conversations about the impact and how we could take something that is a small change with a low implementation burden, as Councillor Ryan mentioned, that will make a big difference for a lot of Portlanders. This ordinance matters a lot to me, and I want to flag 3 quick things. The first is the timely issue. We know we're dealing with a federal administration that is engaged in an all-out assault on families who don't fit their narrow definition of what they think our country should look like. And for many people in my community, in the LGBTQ community, there are still everyday fears around something as basic as where to use the restroom. A policy like this can help my community. But this policy affects my family on another level as well. I am a mom of 2 kids, a son and a daughter. And when we are out, when my son was little, I got to explain to him why when he was with me, we used one restroom, and when he was alone, he used a different restroom, even if both restrooms were single-stall restrooms. And now that he's older and often offers to take his sister to the bathroom when we're out, which is fantastic that they are old enough to do that, at 10 years old, he is faced with the decision of which restroom to use with his little sister. It's confusing, it is stressful, and more importantly, it is a wholly unnecessary choice when you're dealing with 2 single-stall restrooms. My family is not unique. This is something that can help anybody on those days when there is a line for one restroom and an open restroom right next to it, and they are both single-stall restrooms. Councilor Dunphy and I talked a lot about how this policy would affect the businesses that we are asking to make a change. Because while I think the impacts here are really important, I also wanted to make sure that the implementation was simple. And we've come up with something that only applies to existing restrooms. Nobody is required to build something new. Gives space for the city administrator to flexibly implement this, but also provide some guidelines to ensure that there's not a heavy burden for our businesses. And at the end of the day, gives us a quick outcome that can make a difference in every single Portlander's experience when they are out in our city. I hope that we can gain your support today, and I'm proud to be a part of bringing this forward.
Thank you, Councilor Perligini. Councilor Koyama-Lane.
Thank you so much, Council President. I'm proud to be a co-sponsor of this ordinance alongside you, Council President Dunphy, and alongside Council President Emeritus Councilor Perligini. I want to recognize the hard work of the city staff and our predecessors in carrying the torch from the late Commissioner Nick Fish and then Senior Policy Director Jamie Dunphy to today. I want to thank Michelle Rodriguez, former head of staff to Commissioner Mapps. Thank you to Ann Milligan, Senior Deputy City Attorney. Thank you to Lex Yakashowski, LGBTQIA 2S+ policy analyst with the Office of Equity and Human Rights. I want to really thank Aubrey Chen, former LGBTQIA 2S+ policy analyst, who is the absolute best and is now currently an incredible policy aide in my office. And last but not least, to thank all of the community organizations and business associations that have supported the various iterations of this ordinance over many years. I'm really proud of all of your work, and I'm proud to help carry this work over the finish line. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Koyama-Lane. Colleagues, we had a full presentation of this at committee. And we typically do not do additional committees. However, there has been some staff turnover at the Bureau of Permitting and Development. We now have a new permanent director who was not here when we voted on this in committee. He is here if there are technical questions from anybody. Right, I also have staff, I also have Lex here as well to provide any technical questions or background if any colleagues have any before we get into public testimony. I will just note, I want to very much thank the administration and PP&D and the city administrator. We have been working very closely to make sure that we can find the most cost-effective and streamlined and easy, low-burden way to implement this. We will note there is a minimal cost that is currently projected for printing and mailing. My office has been working in regular communication with the city administrator and with the PP&D team to find what the funding considerations would be, and specifically that is to mail a letter to the businesses. And my hope specifically is that we may even go as far as designing a postcard that we could send to businesses, and they can just literally tape that postcard over the existing sign at their bathroom. And I am ongoing committed to seeing this implemented in the most cost-effective and efficient way, and to reduce the burden on our businesses wherever possible. Still seeing no hands in the queue. Keelan, can we please move to testimony?
Yeah. First up for testimony, we have Marilee Carr.
Good morning and welcome.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Cool. I'm Marilee Carr. Thank you, Council President Dunphy, councilors, and Administrator Lee for this opportunity. I'm the president of Flush, PHL USH, which helped create the Portland Loo 20 years ago. I'm also a family physician, retired, a neighborhood emergency team NET team leader, and a NetCert regional trainer in disaster sanitation. My class is titled, You Survived the Earthquake but Die of Dysentery. Sad but true. Portland has terrible bathroom access. It turns off tourists and discourages Portlanders from going out. Access is worse since the pandemic's, so to speak, antitrust effect. Loss of trust has closed off many restrooms in private establishments that used to be open to whoever needed them. Public facilities are also very unevenly distributed. In downtown, it's merely bad. But in long-neglected East Portland, they are so hard to find that human waste is commonly seen in public. The current proposal to relabel all single-occupant restrooms all user is a great example of creative repurposing. There is no practical reason for single-occupant facilities to have a gendered label at all. It only makes the facility inaccessible to people who don't match the signage. Single-user restrooms function equally well for all genders and most species. With this inexpensive change, you will make more restrooms available. But we can't stop there. Portland needs more public restrooms, a lot more, to become once again a place that welcomes visitors and cultivates vibrant connections among its inhabitants. 20 years ago, a broad multi-stakeholder design process asked how a modern public restroom should look and function. The result was the Portland Loo, now installed around the world. I think it's time to repeat that inquiry for the post-pandemic city with newly available technology and building materials. Flush is ready. Let's talk. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Also, I just needed to comment that you have fantastic earrings. Folks who can't see, they are tiny toilet paper rolls.
They're my teaching earrings.
Amazing.
They
Thank
really
you.
break the ice.
Next up, we have Lindsay Perez.
Good morning, Lindsay.
Wow. Good morning, counselors. Thank you for your time. My name is Lindsay Perez. I am a Two-Spirit Tongva human, born and raised in Southern California, but I have resided in District 3 for the last 5 years. For the past 3 years, I have worked as a youth advocate at the Sexual Minority Youth Resource Center, aka SMIRC, at New Avenues for Youth, one of many Portland-based nonprofits working with the Houseless Youth Continuum. In my role, I support at-risk and houseless queer youth every single day as they navigate basic needs, safety, and belonging in public spaces across our city. In my work, I see how restroom access can determine whether a person feels welcome enough to enter a space at all. If someone has to pause and ask, "Am I allowed to be here?" just to use the bathroom, that's a failure not only of accessibility, but of human decency. All user signage lowers barriers for everyone. Parents with kids, such as you, counselor, people with disabilities or caregivers, folks with medical needs, and yes, trans and non-binary and gender-expansive community alike. I come before you today to share my testimony in support of adding non-discrimination requirements for single-occupant restrooms in public spaces. Gender-neutral restrooms are not complicated. They simply make sense for humans. Single occupancy restrooms already serve one person at a time. Assigning them a gender doesn't increase safety or functionality. It only adds unnecessary barriers created by socially manufactured ideas about gender and sex. At the end of the day, everybody poops. And I support this ordinance with the hope that it will increase comfort, dignity, and accessibility for all humans in Portland to take care of theirs. Thank you for your practical and compassionate step towards creating a more inclusive environment for all, Councilor Dunphy, and I appreciate all of your time.
Thank you so much for being here.
Next up, we have Danielle Morris.
Good morning.
Good morning, Councilor Dunphy and councilors. My name is Danielle Morris. I was born in Emmanuel Hospital many decades ago. I reside near Portland. I run a business here, and I represent the Oregon Pride in Business Advocacy Committee, commonly known as ORPIB. I'm here to support the proposed resolution regarding the City Code 2301.071, which simply requires the single occupant restrooms and places in public accommodation be designated as gender-neutral signage. I'm speaking not only as an advocate for inclusion and equitable access, but also as a member of this community who believes in clarity and fairness in public places. I also want to note that ORPIB has reviewed and approved this and is in support of this ordinance. This ordinance is straightforward. It ensures single occupant restrooms are clearly labeled as all user restrooms, rather than gendered-like signs like men or women. It does not require construction, it does not require renovation, and it doesn't require the addition of any new restrooms. It simply standardizes signage so that people entering public spaces know their options clearly and respectfully. Requiring gender-neutral signage improves accessibility for caregivers, people with personal attendants, families, and anyone who may not be served with a standard traditional gendered sign. It supports non-discrimination principles already reflected in local and state law. Aligns along also with practices in our peer cities that have successfully adopted similar signage standards. Importantly, the cost is minimal. Signage is inexpensive, and the city's guidance and notification will help businesses transition smoothly. This is a common sense, low-cost way to ensure that our city's public accommodations are welcome and navigable for everyone. I respectfully urge the council to adopt this ordinance. Thank you for your time, your interest, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much for being here this morning.
Thank you.
That completes testimony.
Fantastic. Colleagues, any debate or discussion or questions? Again, we have staff in the room if there are any technical questions on implementation or cost, but I see no hands in the queue. That's a good sign. All right, pausing for 5 seconds. This item will now move to a second, Councilor Kayama Lane, yeah.
I just want to quickly point out that when looking back at the timelines of meetings of when this was revived, that I heard that the initial proposal was from the City of Portland's Queer Alliance Employee Resource Group, really boosting and magnifying this. And then there was a Street Roots article, and then we also got involved, but it just is a reminder to me of how important and valuable our employee resource groups are.
Absolutely, thank you. Councilor Novick.
I just wanted to say that I'm surprised and appalled that there are such things as single gender, single occupancy bathrooms, which just seems, one other example of the endless capacity of humans for folly.
Thank you, Councilor Novick. Yeah, colleagues, as a proud girl dad and as the person who has been working on this policy for almost a decade now, honestly, I want to apologize to the community for it taking this long to get to this point. I want to thank Commissioner Mapps, who at the end of the old form of city council desperately tried to get this passed as one last policy, and for a variety of technical reasons, it couldn't happen. And it is over a year before we were able to get it done in this new form. Policy takes a long time. The community is ready for this. The lack of pushback is the obvious sign that we are well past, and actually we are playing catch up now. So, colleagues, this item will be moving to a second reading. Can we please call the next item?
The next item is the consent agenda. We've had 2 items pulled from the consent agenda. Items 2026-017 and item 2026-018.
Wonderful. Colleagues, do I have unanimous consent to approve the remainder of the consent agenda? Oh, hi.
So sorry, the consent agenda does require a roll call vote.
There we go. Then let's move to a roll call vote, please.
Okay, thank you. Avalos?
Aye.
Smith?
Aye.
Canal?
Aye.
Fertile-Guinea?
Aye.
Ryan?
Aye.
Koyama Lane?
Aye.
Murillo.
Aye.
Novick.
Aye.
Clark.
Aye.
Green.
Aye.
Zimmerman.
Aye.
Dunphy.
Aye.
The consent agenda is approved with 12 yes votes.
Thank you. Can we please now move to item 9?
Item 9, exempt certain code requirements under City Code Chapter 17.93, renaming city streets for the proposed renaming of a portion of Southwest Jackson Street to Southwest Rose Hill Street.
Colleagues will recall we had a first reading of this last week. Are there any further questions or concerns from colleagues? Seeing none, could we please call the roll?
Avalos.
Aye.
Smith.
Aye.
Canal.
Aye.
Kirtle-Guinea.
Aye.
Ryan.
Aye.
Cuyama Lane.
Aye.
Murillo.
Aye.
Novick.
Down with Andrew Jackson. Aye.
Clark.
Aye.
Green.
Aye.
Zimmerman.
Aye.
Dunphy.
Aye.
The ordinance passes with 12 yes votes.
Could we please read item number 10?
Item 10 requires city administrator to release public records in reference to unspent surplus funds and schedule an oversight hearing.
Thank you. So, colleagues, this is our resolution that we'll be reading on the oversight hearing. Recent developments have made this item particularly timely. This resolution is to adopt a process for council oversight. We are here to potentially schedule a hearing. We are not here to hold one today. We'll hear from the administration tomorrow afternoon, and we can ask questions specific to the discovery of Housing Bureau funds then. Today, we're considering, should council use our oversight powers on these matters? Is this the right way that we use those powers? I will just note, again, we are not having the oversight hearing today, and under Robert's rules, debate on an item must be confined to the merits of the pending motion, so I expect our body to observe the rules in the chamber today. I'm going to turn this over to Councilor Mitch Green.
Thank you, Council President. Before I get into, I have a short presentation that I'm going to share, but before I get into that, I just want to thank my co-sponsors for joining me on this. Councilor Avalos is the chair of the Housing and Homelessness Committee, and Councilor Murillo for your stalwart oversight stance. Thanks for your help in developing this and support for this. Before I get into the presentation, I think I'd just like to offer my co-sponsors a few minutes to offer remarks as well. So I'll just begin with Councilor Avalos. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Green. Yeah, colleagues. So I think I just want to start off by naming the elephant in the room. This is uncomfortable, but this is also really important, what we're going to be talking about, because this resolution is centered on the nearly $21 million in unspent rental service office funds that council learned about last November. But also this weekend, we were informed that the Portland Housing Bureau may also have millions of dollars sitting unspent in the Housing Investment Fund. That pattern really matters, and it gets to the heart of why Portlanders voted for stronger oversight powers under a new form of government. Under the old system, bureaus operated in silos and accounting practices varied widely across the city. Commissioners were structurally incentivized to protect their own bureaus, which created a culture where full financial transparency was often discouraged rather than expected. So this resolution before us today is not about just any one bureau or not about assigning blame to any individual. It is about whether our new system is working the way Portlanders were promised that it would, with real transparency, shared accountability, and responsible stewardship of public dollars. This resolution allows council and the public to understand what happened, how information was shared, and whether our current procedures are sufficient to prevent situations like this going forward. So today we have an opportunity to model what oversight looks like under this new charter, not as punishment, but as a normal, necessary function of a healthy government. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Avalos. Councilor Murillo.
Thank you, Councilor Green. I really appreciate and echo everything that Councilor Avalos laid out as the housing chair. And I want to remind my colleagues that as the legislative body, we exercise 3 core authorities. We have oversight, budget, and legislation. And those are not separate tools. They are meant to function in concert. And oversight is arguably the main part of this because it enables both budgeting and legislation, because it is how we learn that government actually works together, and we need to study the failures from the bottom up, not by legislating from vibes or pretending that we are experts in outsourcing our thinking. We need to make sure that we actually have accurate data so that we can legislate from an informed position. Oversight is where gaps, failures, and missed opportunities actually become visible. And once those realities are made visible by detailed accounting and oversight, they naturally inform how and where we exercise our budget authority and how we legislate deliberately and transparently for the public. That is why an oversight hearing on lost or mismanaged funds is not backwards looking. It is one of the highest forms of state capacity, learning from failure in order to allocate resources more wisely and design rules or plans that prevent recurrence of government failures. Historically, the city has relied way too heavily on a system where individual elected officials were expected to personally manage complex bureaus, hoping that the right skills, judgment, and bandwidth happened to align. That structure produced silos and over-reliance on unaccountable systems or staff, which is increasingly a problem if we do have staff turnover in bureaus, because there is information that is lost with every person that leaves. We correct that by embracing our oversight role. Oversight is how council governs as a body, building the expertise necessary to translate public interest and mass politics into policy that actually functions in city bureaucracy. It is how we restore public trust and ensure accountability as stewards of city funds. And it is how we move from a city that reacts to problems to one that systematically prevents them. We are facing one of the toughest budget cycles I have ever seen, and I had worked in the prior form of government, and we are being asked to make incredibly tough decisions about precious programs that are being cut, about important staff that may need to be cut, and we cannot appropriately do our jobs if we do not have all of the information in front of us about the exact number of dollars that we have to work with. So I would really urge my colleagues to understand that this is part of our role as City Council, is to engage in that oversight work. And I'm very grateful that Councilor Green brought this forward, and that we are going to hopefully show what it means to be responsible with people's public dollars. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments and your support, Councilor Murillo. Keelan, if I just want to share a presentation, I just share my screen. Is it that simple? Okay, great. Bear with me as I fuddle my way through this. Hopefully it's not too awkward. All right. There it is. Okay. No. It is awkward.
Don't worry, everyone is waiting and judging you.
Yeah, that's right. So that's what I want to share. Are you guys seeing a presentation?
Yes.
Okay.
Kind of.
If I do that, is that better?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Hooray.
Okay, colleagues, I have a short presentation that I'm using to sort of walk you through essentially the context that gave cause to the resolution, as well as simply what it does, so the method and the process here. So it's a resolution that's very specifically focused on a particular episode around these fund balances that have been in the news. It's really focused on the 21 million from last summer and fall, so I'll get into that. Going to describe the purpose, the timeline of context here, why we're doing this in the first place, the method and the process, and I can open up for questions to you guys. So, you've all seen the press on this. There's been a range of reporting on the discovery of, roughly $21 million of unspent, unbudgeted, and unaccounted for funds that were discovered in the Portland Housing Bureau. And then there's been subsequent reporting on and even later, a newer tranche of this. And so the context here is that the public was made aware of this at the same time council was made aware of this money, and rightfully have a lot of questions. When did the city know about this? Why were we not using these monies to support Portlanders in need at the time? And frankly, just a sort of fundamental question of, does the city council, who is the body responsible for appropriating monies and also developing policy, are they willing to step in and ask questions through an oversight lens when we are found with discrepancies on the administration side? So those are the public questions that I think provide the context and impetus for this. Just by way of context here and grounding, council's this legislative body that has both the power and I would argue the duty to exercise that oversight role. When we pass laws and we develop our budgets, we don't do that and then walk away. We do that with the intention of making sure that the administration executes to those priorities. I would argue that it's especially important. It was always important to do oversight for city council, but it's especially important in the new form of government that's post-charter, which really does separate the legislative function from the executive side, because we no longer have any executive authority at all. We don't tell the bureaus, we don't tell the city administrator how to execute our will. We provide that will through legislation. So we do need to come back and do the oversight when necessary. And I think given the nature of these fund balance discoveries and the fact that council was not informed in a timely fashion when these significant sums were first identified over the summer, I think presents serious risks to the public trust. And I've already heard that from my constituents. We've read that in the press. And I do want to note, however, and this is really important, and it's in the spirit of being fair here, is that my understanding is that the most recent discovery of even more money was actually quite timely in terms of the communication. I understand that as soon as Ruth found this money, first thing she did was pick up the phone and call the council president. So when I talk about the period of timeliness and communication, I really am confining that to the August through November period. I think that's a really important piece to bring into this discussion, and for the public following along. There is a distinction there. That doesn't mean that we don't, it does, of course it adds context here, but I think if we do this oversight work on the 21 million period, it will help us be better for how we think about this, this broader auditing conversation going forward. And then finally, I think the way that if you have a lack of public trust in government, the obligation to restore that public trust falls to city council, right? We were the ones who appropriated the money in the first place to develop the laws. We can't cast blame to the administration. We can't kick the can over, pass the buck, so to speak, to the city administrator or the mayor on this. This really is city council's obligation to restore that public trust through this oversight action. So that's why I'm motivating this. For context, colleagues, the timeline that I think provides the impetus for this resolution, and it's described in the whereas clauses, is that on August 8th, council was notified by the then city administrator, Michael Jordan, that we should expect a mid-year budget shortfall driven primarily by underperformance, if you will, in our business license taxes on the order of about $12 million. So that's the information that we were providing in August to let us know that we had to prepare for a technical accounting adjustment ordinance in the fall that would close that gap. There would be some cuts involved. So that's what we know in August 8th. But what we didn't know is that also in August, the Portland Housing Bureau had discovered a significant amount of money that was not in the budget and was not accounted for. And while there was some uncertainty in the range of what that balance was, we know that as early as late August, that was communicated to be at least $11 million. So there's some uncertainty of the fund balance, but we know that there's significant fund balance. And I'll note that that's at the same scale as the shortfall in the BLT. And so when we think about whether it's a significant discrepancy to share with council, if it's the same magnitude as the thing that's driving your TAO adjustment requirement, that is significant in my view. By October, council is then presented with a TAO proposal by the city administrator, and we've got a work session on this. I think it was October 22nd, if I have my memory right. It's late October. And then through October and mid-November, we debate, we consider amendments, we move the TAO through the finance committee and then the full council, all while we still don't know about this money. Okay, so council's considering a fall tow without knowledge that there is potentially significant sums that need to be brought into that ordinance to balance our books. And then we find out on November 20th, after we've gone through that TAO process, that there is $21 million. And that's when you start to see the reporting from the public saying, trying to draw a linkage between other events that happened this summer related to the Portland Housing Bureau, but as well as sort of casting doubt on our ability to govern, frankly. And then in December, I worked to develop an oversight methodology. I joined with some co-sponsors, and I tried to bring this forward for a 9/12 agenda item for the last council meeting of the month because there were still unresolved questions surrounding this money, and I felt it was necessary to engage in some sort of a formal step more formally into the oversight space. That didn't get the support of 9/12, although I do want to thank the 7 councilors who did join me in that. And now here we are. It's February 2026. We were notified yesterday or 2 days ago of potentially much more money being available. And so I think that's just the latest piece of context. And now we're here discussing this resolution today. So how do we go about this? We don't have, our charter gives us investigatory power, but we don't really have any adopted rules that clarify how we might do oversight. So the resolution contemplates a process. When we think of oversight, I want to say that oversight always exists on a scale between informal and formal. So there's different ways to do oversight with varying degrees of formality. I would just say we do it all the time in the most informal sense when we ask a casual inquiry from the dais of a bureau director or the city administrator or the mayor. We do it when we send emails to the administration saying, hey, I heard this from my constituents. They believe that it's like maybe not in line with our policies. Can I get some more information on this? And that's a normal routine part of the work. And I think that's where oversight should normally live. Very informal, non-adversarial. It's just really sort of our constant engagement. At the most formal expression of this, council would invoke subpoenas and make people swear in under oath. And I think that's something we want to avoid and use very, very sparingly. And so the method that I've contemplated here sits somewhere in the middle. It's formal because we're passing a resolution to say this body's going to invoke that power. But we're nowhere near, directing the auditor to go out and issue subpoenas and having people lawyer up and, put their hand on the sacred text of their choice and say, I swear that what I'm about to say is true. So this is really a kind of middle ground in terms of formality. And just to remind you of the charter authority that gives us, I would say just not only the power, but the duty here. The underlying motive here and contemplation in our charter is that in order for council to do its legislative function, right? If we're to do our work well, we need to have the information that we need to do that work. And if we find we're in a situation where we don't have the full picture or there's key facts missing, then we are empowered by Charter Section 2-109 to compel the production of books, documents, evidence. We can go so far as issuing subpoenas for folks to show up and talk to us, but we don't do that here in this resolution. We're just simply saying we want to collect these records. We want to bring this into the council ops to help us collate this, and then we're going to schedule an oversight hearing with invitations, not summons, to come and talk to us and answer to a structured set of questions that are also in the resolution, with plenty of time for folks to get ready for that. So in the resolution itself, it documents a process. The first, if we adopt this resolution today, it would direct the city administrator to share relevant public records with council and council operations by February 20th. So that's sort of going through and saying what's responsive in our record surrounding the questions that follow here in item 3, and then getting that to council ops and also councilors to start to consume and think about in advance of an oversight hearing. The step 2 in the process really asks council ops to help us be this sort of independent arbiter of like, here's the information we collected in this process, and here's what we got from the city, but also here's what we got from other sources, because there's other information that's floating out there too. And I think it's really important for council to be able to delineate between, here's what a journalist submitted as part of their reporting versus what we actually get from our own internal systems. It's really important. And it's also important that this doesn't just go to Councilor Green's inbox and then I'm the one sifting through the data and then I'm saying, here's what I found. It needs to go to all of us, and it needs to go to Council Ops to help them do this, help us do this independently and with some objectivity here. So the dates that you see in here are actually in the amendment that I'm going to move after I talk about this, because I first wrote this thing months ago, so obviously you need to shift the dates. But then finally, Council President will schedule an oversight hearing no later than March 6th with invitations for testimony. So again, we're not compelling anyone to show up, but we're saying we would like you to show up and help us get some clarity on the information we found. For relevant individuals, to address the following questions. And these are just outlined in the resolution because I wanted this to be focused and not just a scattershot of whatever the heck I'm thinking about that day. Like let's really focus on these very specific questions, which is what happened to the funds and what led to them not being spent in prior years. Who was aware of the funds? At what point in time was each party made aware? Why was council not informed in a timely manner? Third, what dynamics led to this information not being shared with council? And what was the sequence of events given that council had received differing accounts of what has occurred? That's where you get this engagement with this outside narrative construction through the press, right? And then finally, to what degree decisions were made around these funds and when information was or wasn't shared as it pertains to the development of the fall tower, which I think is absolutely critical because again, some people in the city government had information about money in the development of the fall tower and others did not. And specifically council did not. So that's really important to figure out. So that's the process outlined by the resolution. And it leaves it to the council president to schedule these oversight hearings. And then I'll just note that after I'm done with this, I'm gonna move green 1, which just adjusts the underlying to have the dates that are matched on this slide. So maybe I'll leave this slide up here and we can just move into questions.
Great. We can do technical clarifying questions from councilors in queue. Councilor Green, I'll have you move the amendment specifically so public testimony can be reacting to the actual language. We'll vote on the testimony, or we'll vote after testimony on the amendment and then vote on the resolution. Councilor Clark?
I don't have clarifying questions.
Great. Councilor Novick?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. My question, Councilor Green, is about what relevance this information might have had to the TOW. As I recall, one of the major issues with the TOW was what reaction was the council going to make to the prospect of a general fund shortfall in this year. And although I proposed taking some of this housing money and putting it into the general fund, it appears I'm a distinct minority. So I'm just wondering how you think that the information would have affected what we did about the TOW.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you straight up that, Council, it's a great question. Had I any indication early on whatsoever that there was RSO funds or restricted funds related to housing and tenant stabilization or rental assistance, my participation in an amendment process would look differently. Like if you'll recall in Murillo 1, we were trying to get money for rent assistance, and we were paying for it by, in part, cutting into the impact reduction program. It's entirely likely that I would not have gone down that very controversial road had I known that there was $21 million or maybe even $10 million at play in that. Those negotiations could have been quite different. Those conversations could have been quite different. But in the absence of that information, I didn't know that. And so I'm speaking for my part and how I engaged in that process. That would have been really critical information. But I think what I'm more worried about fundamentally is if we're developing a TOW that looks at all of our fund balances and we're not considering the inclusion of this new money that's being found. So we're putting forward an adjustment ordinance that it's not balanced anyway, because we have not allocated those monies. So there's that piece too. So I'm not sure if that answers your question.
Councilor Pertolini.
Thank you, Council President. Councilor Green, I'm looking at the new dates on your amendment, and I am just wondering if you ran those dates by the administration, are they going to be able to meet those dates? Same for council operations and council president. Are you going to be able to schedule this work session by March 6th? I know how backed up our calendar is.
Yeah, I'll start with I did check in with council ops, and I think the initial concern was like, whoa, these dates I have to get this data tomorrow, because the underlying didn't have those adjusted. But I think when we first anticipated this in December, the general lag periods that are built into this were workable for council ops, and with the amendment that's on play, pushing it out, I didn't get any pushback. Dana, you're here, so you can speak for yourself, but it seems like that's workable on the council ops side. No, I haven't talked to CA Lee on this specifically, on whether they can execute the gathering of the data request, but it is 2 weeks from today.
City Administrator, is that something that we can expect you all to be able to successfully meet?
I believe so. We'll treat it like a regular open records request and try to get it through the process in that manner.
Thank you. Council President.
With action by council today, my team and council ops will work starting today to find time to schedule this. I have every confidence that we will.
We have dates available that aren't already filled with other work session needs.
I believe we will be able to find a time.
Okay,
yes.
Thank you.
Councilor Canal.
Thank you, Council President. I just have a question about, in terms of whether the questions that the resolution outlines some questions that are going to be able to be asked in this hearing, and I wanted to understand if that list was exhaustive, or if there are other questions that would be, is it designed that this is the scope of it exclusively, or can we talk about other things in it, either by virtue of adding that to the resolution or just bringing them up live?
It's a good question. So my intent by putting the specific questions in there was to sort of model what we've seen in some other styles, in particular in Baltimore, where they say, we'd like the Infrastructure Bureau to show up and present on this item, and here are some very specific questions you want to be prepared for. And so I think the idea is to provide these as a general enough skeleton there to give the city administrator enough of a focus frame to do that records request, because you can't do that public records gathering if you don't really know what the scope is limited to. But once we get the information for us to digest, when we show up to this oversight hearing, I think that we are free to explore any line of question that's relevant to that. So if there's not a very specific edge case, or if there's not an aspect of this that's not contemplated here, that's in part because we don't necessarily know what the full scopes of questions are going to be until we see the information come back. And then the resolution leaves it open for the council president to schedule as many oversight hearings as are necessary to sort of close the question. So the very first one is sort of our opportunity to react to what information is collated and collected for us. But where we go from there, I think, is going to depend upon, our judgment as a body and the presiding officer's judgment as to whether we're engaged in relevant questioning. And I think that's also part of what we're trying to establish here in terms of norms, because what I really want to avoid is this becoming a sort of like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like a kangaroo court in some sense. This really needs to be productive. And I can't stress enough that this isn't trying to do a gotcha on any particular aspect of this city, but say, here are some questions for us to focus on. We can't rule out that there aren't new questions that emerge from that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm reading it because it says, including without limitation, communications and other information pertinent to understanding the following questions, is trying to understand which part is the without limitation here. I'm broadly supportive of it, but I'm trying to understand, especially as it relates to the fourth question, to what degree were decisions made around these funds and what information was or wasn't shared. And then it says, as it pertains to development of the fall tile proposal. And so the questions that I'm interested in also adding to this are, how many, if any, positions have been eliminated at the Housing Bureau in the course of the time since this money started being accrued? Would any of those positions have been able to be funded by these dollars, given the restrictions that the money has in all of these streams? Were any of the positions filled, or were they all vacant at the time of their elimination? And then just related to that, if any of those positions are represented. And so I think that that's maybe outside the scope of the TAL except as it relates to the explanation you were giving, Councilor Green, about the amendment, Marilla 1. But I do think that it was relevant to previous budget cycles, including in June. So I'm trying to understand if that's something that maybe the information that we get will lead us to those questions. But I at least wanted to mention that out loud from a legislative intent perspective, that is something I'm interested in asking about.
No, it's noted there, yeah.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Smith.
Thank you, Council President Dunphy. I have a couple of technical questions that I need DCA Oliveira and CFO Berry and Director Bonacar to ask before I can make a educated vote on this particular piece. Could they come up here for a second?
And as our staff are approaching, I will recall we're mostly focusing on process at this moment, not on the specifics.
That's what I'm.
Yeah, perfect. Just want to make sure we're.
Talking about today having our first oversight. But before we can have an oversight, I need to know who to talk to. So can you explain to me, CFO Berry, how do you all get information from the bureaus, not just the Portland Housing Bureau, but all of the bureaus? You all don't handle that information. That comes directly from the bureaus. And if I think this in my head, that you depend on them to give you the information. You don't gather the information. So could you explain to me, how do you all get the information? The financial budget information?
Yeah, Counselor, I'll attempt, and let me know if I'm not answering the question the way you're looking for the record. Jonas Beery, the City's Chief Financial Officer. So the primary method of gathering this information is through the budget development process, managed through the City Budget Office, and Ruth Levine, Director of that office, was mentioned earlier. So typically, as that annual budget development effort occurs, there's a coordinated effort between the bureaus and the City Budget Office to submit, as the bureaus submit that information. The Budget Office, and with other participation, kind of reviews, assesses, and translates that information into the budget document. We then also have periodic checkpoints, as you know, the technical adjustment ordinances, or TAOs, which are an opportunity to get eyes on that as well. So that's generally the process.
This is not your data. This is the Bureau's data that comes to you.
The Bureau submits information through the city budget systems based upon the guidance that's provided. So I just want to be, the source of the information is the Bureau's. It comes to the Budget Office to help manage that, and it's city data. I just want to be clear about it. It's not owned by.
City, but what I'm trying to differentiate between, because if we're going to try to get information, we need to know where the data originates from.
Correct.
So it doesn't originate from you. And the reason why I wanted to talk to you too, DC Oliveira, that information for your particular departments that are under your purview, is that information that you get from the bureaus as well? This is not information that you actually come up with. It's from the bureaus, correct?
DC Oliveira, for the record. Donnie Oliveira, correct, Counselor.
Okay. So then my next question is going to be to Director Bonacar. So do you create the information? So when we're asking for information, we're going to call this oversight hearing if this passes, do you have like finance people in your department that creates this information, and then they give it to the director? Because you're the director, correct?
Correct.
But you have you have a whole finance team, correct?
Correct.
And how many of those people do you have? Because I think that's going to be very important when we're sending out invitations. We need to know who to send the invitation to.
I think there will be clarity on who that should be. I
mean, how many finance people do you have in your department?
I think the team is about 8 or 9 folks.
So you have about 8 or 9 people who are responsible for different sources of money that comes into your department, who's responsible for keeping track of all this information, correct? So I just want to make sure, Councilor Green, that we're clear, because a lot of us may think that we're going to talk to Ruth and Jonas and DCA Oliveira only, but that's not the ticket. From what I understand, we have to talk to those 8 or 9 people who are directly responsible for keeping track of the dollars in those bureaus. And so I think we have been kind of led in a different way, as if CFO Berry is responsible for the data, but that data comes from a department that comes from a particular group of finance officers who actually do the numbers and are responsible. And so I have one more question for you, CFO Berry. Oh, no, I go back to Director Bonacart. So do all of the different pots of money, do they get reported every year? Do you know that the 3 that actually got reported late or have a surplus, are they required to report every single year?
Interim Director Michael Bonacore for the record. Yes.
Okay, so they are. Okay, so make sure you put that as a part of your questioning, because if they're supposed to report every year, with that large of a surplus, it appears that it wasn't just 1 year. It appears that there probably were multiple years that these funds built up. So I want to make sure that we're asking the right questions of the people when we actually have an oversight. The other issue is there a timeline from which we are supposed to get the information when you, in your budget session, Director Bonacart, is there a timeline that you're supposed to go by to make sure that CFO Berry has all the information? I mean, like, do you have like a checklist? Like, okay, I want to make sure that the rental assistance, I want to make sure that the Airbnb money, I want to make sure, is there a process that you all have internally to get the information to Ruth, who is at the Central Budgeting Office, and to your DCA, who is your direct supervisor? Do you have a checklist that you mark off every year when you're doing this? And I know you just became the new interim director. We had a previous director that was terminated a couple of months ago, but she was here for 3 years and you were the assistant director, but you should know some of this protocol. And I'm just trying to figure out so that we know what the protocol is so that we're asking the right questions. She was here for 2 years. Thank you but she was here for 2 years. And she resigned. Thank you. She separated from the city, but I know some of this falls on the previous director, but I'm trying to figure out, is there a natural protocol that everybody has to follow every year when we go on the budget cycle? That's what I'm trying to figure out.
There is, just for the record, I served previously as the interim director for the Portland Housing Bureau and then spent a little bit of transition time with Helmi as she sort of onboarded and moved from California.
Okay.
So still in a learning process, but the broad answer to your question is yes.
Is yes. Okay, so we can expect that. So if we ask some questions like that of the financial folks, the 8 people who are responsible for this, that they should know about when they reported monies. So that, I mean, that's going to get to it, if they reported the money or not, because it sounds like they're supposed to report the money annually, and it appears that we have a surplus that covered it multi-years. I'm just making a statement. I'm just saying. So when we ask those questions, that they won't be surprised that you said that there's a protocol, and if we ask them and they say it's not a protocol, then we need to be believing what you and DCA Oliveira are saying. Because you can understand right now that all of us individually and collectively, we are really trying to figure out how to reconcile, because we're feeling uncomfortable right now.
And again, Councilor, we're starting to edge into some of the content rather than process.
I'm making a statement. I'm just saying what I feel uncomfortable about, but what will make me feel more comfortable is I know that they have a protocol, and if we ask a question that they should be able to answer those questions within the line. And the last question that I have for you, I understand that you don't want to make this a kangaroo court, Councilor Green. And I'm just wondering, to avoid that, why don't we just call this actual hearing in our Arts and Economy, under which the Housing Bureau brings all their issues to? Why don't we just do that?
Yeah, so I thought about that, and what the charter says, 2-106 or 109, is that council as a body or a duly designated committee can do oversight. We don't have that power conferred on our individual committees, and I think that this is a matter of significance such that all 12 of us who are elected should be in the room where you're asking the questions and you're engaging with this discovery process, not a subcommittee of council.
Okay.
So that's what I think it's really important for us to do it in this formal way.
And I appreciate this. I was one of the 8 who did the 9/12s that wanted to have this conversation. But one thing that I would change is I don't believe that council ops need to be responsible for this, for putting this together. I think this is so important. If we're going to do this, that needs to come out of the council president's office. The council president needs to be in charge of this whole process and putting this on, not council ops.
Just let me clarify here. Council ops is only just handling, like receiving the data from the city administrator, as well as like journalists who might have some information on this, and providing a repository for us to access. The council president will actually do the scheduling of the oversight hearings themselves, engage in the invitations based upon the outcome of that discovery, and then allow us to structure this. So
exactly, that's what I'm saying. So I want to make it clear that council ops is not responsible for this, that we have a elected person who is our council president who should be running this show, not council ops. I don't want them to think in no kind of way that they're the last word on this. It needs to come from our council president, and that needs to be made clear in this resolution.
And I'll just note for the record, the buck stops with me, but council ops
I want it to be clear that it stops with you, because this actual resolution doesn't make it seem like that. It makes it seem like they're the last stop. You're the last stop.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you very much for giving me that technical information.
Thank you, Councilor Smith. Councilor Novick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to actually, if you could stay, DCA Berry, Mr. Bonacart, the question. I want to follow up on something that Councilor Smith already alluded to. Is it true, do we know that actually this money was accumulating for more than 1 year, that it's probably over several years?
Councilor, I believe that that's true, that the balance as it exists accumulated. It's not as binary as that, because there's funds that come in and funds that go out, and so it's difficult to track that. But I do believe it was not a point in time activity. I also just maybe take a quick moment to be clear about sort of the reality of legacy systems that existed prior to this form of government that do not exist today. And so I just think that's really important consideration as we're talking about, the kind of maybe the root causes that led us here are not the same as the reality that we face in our financial oversight and management systems today. And so I just think that's important consideration for council.
Thank you, Councilor Novick. Councilor Canal.
Hi, just a quick technical question, because that just opened the door. You operate on first in, first out, though, in terms of how when you're talking about things that accumulate over years, right? Like, what's your basis for? Kind of have to make a working assumption.
Councilor, I think, I mean, I want to be careful that we're not kind of conflating, because there's sort of the accounting principle of first in, first out, and that may be different from the way that, fund dollars are tracked in various funds and subfunds.
Fair enough. Okay, I just wanted to, that's my only question for you. I don't know if anyone else has, but I wanted to just talk about one quick thing related to the question that Councilor Smith asked about why this isn't going to committee and the assignment. We have talked about potentially that being a role of the committee of the whole in the future. That's a good idea. It wouldn't necessarily have to be there, but it's an option in the future should we allow for that creation and then create it. But that wouldn't happen before the timeline that this document lays out. So I just wanted to clarify that effectively, as of this moment, our only option is to have it be the full council if we're going to do a formalized process, and I do think we should. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Canal. Councillor Zimmerman.
Thank you. Just a couple of technical questions, and I truly don't know who the right source to ask or to answer these would be. I'm wondering how staff will appear, and then I guess the A to that would be how do unionized staff appear? Does the city attorney represent them? Does the union represent them? Do we expect legal representation to occur? And considering that a significant part of the situation, probably a major source of information would be the former housing director, what authorities does the council have if such a hearing were to occur to get information from the head of the organization that is in question, which is the former housing director, since she's separated with a large payment agreement out in severance? So do we have the ability to get information from her? And how will the council, because this would be a new step, how will the council receive, I'm going to call it training, on what this can look like, should look like, probably from our city attorney, and to make sure that we don't turn into what I'm very concerned will be is an inquiry that really jumps the bounds of good order. So that's kind of where some of my technical questions lie right now before we discuss.
I can speak to some of that. In terms of how do you compel someone who maybe doesn't work here anymore or may be relevant to the questioning to show up? What the structure that we're contemplating in this specific resolution is to stop short of actually issuing summons and subpoenas. And so if people choose not to show up, then I think they choose not to show up, and then it's up to us to decide whether or not that is a gap in our line of questioning, and then to contemplate taking the next step to direct, I think the way the charter would lay it out, or per city attorney's guidance to me when I was thinking through this, was to then say, okay, if you have a discrete, very specific person that you want to show up who's not going to accept the invitation, then you would direct the auditor or the mayor to issue a subpoena. And at that point, you need to give them plenty of time. And then we've entered a whole new world. So I think in this structure here, I'm not contemplating that we actually compel people who don't want to show up. What I'm thinking in terms of staff is it's an invitation for staff to come up and engage in a line of questioning. And I think it's incumbent on us to be fair and not put them in a situation where we're saying, okay, you're under oath. Anything you say is a lie here, because we're not putting them under oath. And so in some sense, it's not terribly different than any time that we do talk to them up here in our work sessions or our committee work. The only difference is that we're intentionally inviting them based upon information that we would get in the data collection system or process. I would let a city attorney answer the question about representation, though.
Welcome, Heidi Brown. Come on up. City attorney.
Good afternoon, Council President, Council Vice President, all of you. Heidi Brown, for the record. She, her pronouns, and I'm with the City Attorney's Office, and I'm acting City Attorney while our City Attorney is out. Councilor, you had a question about who represents people. In this process, so our office represents the city as an organization, and so we provide advice to the city as an organization. So if an individual employee wanted to bring an attorney with them, we would need to look at that. I mean, because you're talking about an employment investigation, not a criminal or civil liability investigation, and we have a right to ask our employees questions. If they're questions that the employee reasonably believes could lead to discipline, then we give them the right to have a union representative present with them. Their role, though, is very limited in that we still have a right as an employer to ask questions of our employees. So it's not an easy question. If you wanted to if you have concerns about conduct by city employees, one option would be to request that the city administrator have the Bureau of Human Resources do an investigation to see if misconduct has occurred. So, for example, we get complaints to the ombuds office at times or to the auditor's office at times that may be within their purview, but sometimes they're not, and they allege misconduct by an employee, and those investigations get referred over to the Bureau of Human Resources. So, you know, that is one way to proceed that would kind of fall within our normal process, and then also have an investigation occur in our normal manner, which would allow them to bring their union representative with them rather than at a public setting, which makes it a little more challenging. And then, you know, you can certainly request that that investigative file be presented to you as part of this investigation.
Thank you for that explanation. It seems to me that some information that would come out of such a hearing by March 6th could result in an employee disciplinary investigation. And that's concerning for me. I will also say that before we get into other statements, the timelines I do think are quite aggressive for a reasonable amount of time to pull data and get, I mean, I certainly would not appear without representation in front of this body based on the way that this is going. So this is why I'm asking my questions about this, because from what I understand in our discussions with Ruth, a number of her employees are unionized employees. And if I was a union rep, I'd die on that dais before I came and let my employee come in without representation. So I would be very concerned about that. And so given that, I do think the timeline is worth discussion if this goes forward, because I think that the timeline as it stands doesn't look like a timeline that would get any participation, because if you're up against a bad timeline, you choose just not to go, to make the point. And so this is where I think representation is probably going to come into part of this if this goes forward. And so, and I certainly believe that if this goes forward, it will result in some decision-making about employee conduct investigations from what comes out of that table. So thank you, Heidi, for that. I think there's a lot of gray area here and some real unknowns that I'm going to keep listening. That gives me a lot of pause here.
Thank you,
Are there any other questions for me right now, or I can step away? I'm here.
Okay. Thank you, Heidi.
Thank you.
Councilor Smith?
Yes, I just want to clarify. Will we be able to have our own questions at this oversight?
Yeah, just let me walk through the process again.
Okay.
So if we pass this today, the directive to the city administrator will be in a span of about 2 weeks, which is the time it takes for any public record. That's the timeline on most public records requests anyway, to go through and gather all the responsive data, the records that are inside of our city, and supply that to council ops and us directly simultaneously, by the way. And then we will review the full gamut of information that has been collected by February 27th. And then from there, we draft our own questions that we are prepared to show up on March 6th with. And, you know, when we do that work, it's going to be really important that we keep in mind that we're not asking anyone to place them, we're not placing anyone under oath. And so the questions need to be really pre-decisional, non-judgmental, just sort of like, help me understand what I have found in this record. That's how I'm thinking about it. Yeah.
And since we found out about this latest money, shouldn't we be adding an amendment to also find out how this latest money was not given to us as well? Even though Ruth, when she found out about it, she immediately told council president, but it appears to me that this other money has been sitting there for multiple years too, and we didn't find out about it in the last 3 years. So we should also have that conversation too. How did this money, it's the same department and it goes into the same investment trust fund.
I would say that that's probably something we should debate in the substantive part of this. There's a reason why I'm limiting it to the 21, but I would love to get in that argument with you, or not argument, but that discussion with you because there's good reasons why I've chosen that. It's not really technical, though. I think that if we can understand what happened in that period of time, we probably have most of our questions answered for this new money, frankly.
Not necessarily, it's a different pot of money, but so that we're clear technically, and maybe one of the CFO or the DCA can answer this, which pots of money go into the investment housing fund? Isn't it just the rental assistance and the...
We're gonna get a memo, I think, tomorrow that's gonna explain a lot of that, but I think...
But we need to know this now before we ask the question, because that leads me to another question, why we're not asking about this new 15 million in addition, because it's been sitting there too. And it's from the same department, so it's the same directive or non-directive that was given not to expose those dollars to the council.
Counselor, what I'm really trying to avoid in this is leading this line of questioning by concluding that there's been wrongdoing. Yeah. What I'm really trying to do is say, here are 4 specific questions that will help us gather some information that we can review in an impartial way, so that way when we go into an oversight hearing, we know what kind of questions to ask to close the books on a very specific period of history. I understand. I mean, I also think that the context of the new money is very relevant to why we need to have this discussion and set these norms. But
there's a pattern.
But I'm really worried that we're going to muddle the scope of this by trying to add in stuff that we haven't even let yet.
So, okay, I'll keep it to the 21.
Yeah.
You need to tell me what monies go into this housing investment fund for the first 21? What are the 2 pots of money that we're going to be discussing?
We are going to get a memo tomorrow from the city administrator that explains.
Shouldn't you have had that before you put this resolution out?
I put this resolution out before we learned about 15 more million.
But we're not adding it, so it doesn't matter. So you should know what pots go in.
Colleagues, we're getting into substance, not technical.
It is technical, because I need to technically know which pots of money are we talking about before I vote on it.
Counselor, this is about us understanding what conversations happen in the city, what decision-making look like in the city. It's not about balances of funds necessarily so much as it is about understanding why we were not disclosed a certain amount of information during a period of time. So I'm not getting
Councilor Green, if it's not about balances of money, why are we having this? Why
colleagues,
are we talking
this
about
is a debate at this point, not clarification.
It's clarification to me.
It is a back and forth.
Yeah.
There is a question. So I'm asking, we held the debate to the end. We have folks who are signed up to testify, and I have a couple other voices for technical clarification, and then we will move forward to public testimony. Councilor Maria.
Thank you, Council President. Yeah, I just want to clarify from some of the questions and comments that we've received. I think that there is the impression that if we do an oversight hearing, then we will find wrongdoing, and that's not true. The whole point of an investigation and discussion is so that we can get to the bottom of this without any presuppositions of what the outcomes might be. The administrative side does not seem to think that this timeline is too aggressive. That is only coming from this legislative body. And I will tell you, the public does not think that this is too aggressive. If we have around $40 million in the city of Portland that's going missing while we're telling people we're gonna cut beloved services, we should be getting to the bottom of this. And that's a dereliction of duty for us not to do that as a council body. And I bet if we did that through a committee, that people would then complain that they didn't get to hear it and have a discussion on it together. So I really want us to get into the testimony. I do think we're just veering into commentary, but again, this might just be a simple result of us having turnover at high leadership in the Bureau over and over again and not passing on that information, and that's why the dollars went missing. It could be something as innocent as that, but that still means that there's an issue with our systems and how we track funding that needs to be addressed. So that is what I am hoping this will uncover so that we can rectify our systems moving forward, and I just wanted to make that very clear for some of my colleagues.
Again, I will remind my colleagues, we are in technical clarifying question time. We will get to debate in a few minutes. Councilor Canal.
I move to limit debate on the technical questions to the current queue. So everybody in the queue with their hand up would still be able to ask their questions.
Great. Thank you. Councilor Zimmerman.
My technical question about how will the city attorney train us?
I'm sorry, point of order. We have a motion on the table.
My bad.
We have to vote for, okay, whatever you want, Alana.
If the person who made the motion wants to remove it since there's only one person in the queue, I'm fine with that, Counselor, but we have a motion on the table and I want to make sure that we close that.
And just to be clear, either way, Councilor Zimmerman would still be able to speak, and anyone else whose hand is up now.
Okay. Vote on the motion.
Okay, so just to clarify, Councillor Cano made the motion to limit debate to those in the queue, and I think Councillor Novick seconded? Yes. Thank you. All right. We'll call the roll on this motion. Avalos.
Aye.
Smith.
Aye.
Canal.
Aye.
Bertolini.
No.
Ryan.
Aye.
Quayamaline.
Aye.
Mario.
Aye.
Novick.
Aye.
Clark.
Aye.
Green.
Aye.
Zimmerman.
Aye.
Dunphy.
Aye.
The motion carries with 11 yes votes and 1 no vote.
Glad we could do that. I still didn't have my technical question answered about how the city attorney intends to train the city council to conduct such an inquiry. We've been trained for a lot of our different roles. This is new. So what is the training plan to ensure that we stick to questions that would be appropriate for whatever this is about to turn into? Can you lay out that training plan?
Well, Counselor, since this is the first time it's come up, then I don't know that we have a plan, but what I could tell you that I can just think of would be, I do think that having people trained in investigations is helpful to have. So one option, maybe council wants to hire an outside investigator to perform the investigation for you and then bring forward a report from which you could then gather information. As the auditor's office does also, as I said earlier, they do investigations, and then HR, of course, does investigations. But the first option would be hiring an outside investigator, and that might be more appealing to all of you because that's somebody who's trained in that. Getting you all trained in that, would take work, of course, because investigators, and it depends on how much training you want, et cetera, to be able to assess whether or not there was some, whether or not this occurred, whether somebody engaged in any wrongdoing, and it really depends on what questions you're asking. And I did see the questions, and I don't have them in the top of my head right this second, but I think some of the questions that I'm hearing today that you're concerned about would be helpful to have somebody who, has some extensive training and is experienced in performing investigations.
I asked that question because I assume there are some questions that are permissible and some that would not be. And that's similar, if we're ever on a hiring panel, we usually get a brief about like how you conduct that panel, what's an appropriate line of questions, et cetera, so that we are conducting that duty appropriately. And so in a world where there are no parameters on the 12 counselors who are questioning, that's why I'm asking that. It seems like there would need to be some sort of training about what that looks like. I would certainly want it before I participated in such a thing. So
that's a good question, Counselor. Thank you for clarifying what you were asking. I didn't understand that part of it, and that's a good point. For an employer investigation, and you're acting as a legislative body investigation, you're looking into this. There's the parameters are really around. If you were to ask questions that were completely outside of the investigation, for example, if you're doing an investigation into this and you ask somebody whether they have a driver's license and they're driving off duty without one, that really has nothing to do with this. If you ask somebody about their private life, for example, that really doesn't have anything to do with this. Their marital status or things like that, it really don't have anything to do with this. That would be going beyond the scope that could be viewed as an unreasonable invasion of their privacy. But to the extent you're staying within the scope of what this is about and related to determining what happened with the funds, what's the practice been at the Bureau, how the funds are reported, that is within the scope of your job as a legislative body and the city executive branch and administrative branch's job to have that oversight.
Okay, and then, so no training plan has been established, and then I want to make sure that I understood some of your opening comments, Counselor, that you said there have been no procedures for what this hearing would look like that have been established. So we've got to establish a procedural, like how do we just go through the motions? Like how does the council president conduct such a hearing? That is still to be determined. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I'm contemplating in the resolution is whether or not this body thinks it's appropriate to step into that more formal space. I think it leaves a lot to the city, the council president as the presiding officer to determine what the rules of decorum are and how we would conduct ourselves, how to sort of limit our counselors in terms of their questioning. And so we can have that conversation, but until I know whether this body is willing to even go into that space, that seems like an unnecessary level of detail.
And of course, our office is happy to work with Council President or any of you on what this could look like.
Perfect. Okay. Colleagues, it is 11:15. We have folks signed up to testify. I'm wondering if folks want to take a very quick bio break. Yeah. We're going to take a 10-minute recess, and we'll be back at 11:25. Everybody go pee. And we are back. Thank you all for your patience. Keelan, can we please call up public testimony?
All right, first up, we have Terry Harris, followed by Benjamin Gilbert and Hugo Flores.
Welcome, Terry.
Thank you all. Thank you for this opportunity. Appreciate it, as always. Terry Harris for the record. I'm going to try and be pretty quick, but I have a lot to say here. The Governance Committee has heard me a little bit, and based on the conversation that y'all just had, I kind of want to go back to Councilor Green's spectrum of oversight and just point out that if you were doing investigative stuff and require lawyers and that level of thing, that's not what this resolution should be about. And let me just say that this resolution as a way to do oversight is the right way to do it. It is a common practice elsewhere, and I know Councilor Green mentioned Baltimore. This is exactly how it's done. You give notice and a time to respond. It's scoped in advance. You focus on documents and delivering the materials to the council. And then there's a public hearing to air it all out. That's where you are right now. You're not doing an investigation. Nobody should be worried for their job. This is not where you need to be right now. You do want, as Councilor Canal says, the space to do further investigation and things that should come out of it. For example, I think you might find that the Housing Investment Fund needs an investigation as to what that's for, what goes in it, what comes out of it, who manages it, but that's a whole separate thing from what this hearing should be. Finally, I'll say that at this level, you should be considering if this were a rule of council, a council rule, what would that rule look like? And that rule would look kind of like this resolution. So I support the resolution, and I encourage you all to pass it. And finally, I think moving beyond this resolution, the first thing that happens is it's a collaboration with the city attorney, with the city administrator, the council president's office, and the sponsor to manage that hearing and the information that goes into it and the scoping of that hearing. This is for you all, of course, to learn, but it's also for the public. It's for the public trust, it's for accountability, it's for transparency, it's for rumor control.
and ultimately, hopefully, a process improvement. So I encourage you all to pass this kind of as is and roll with it collaboratively. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome, Ben.
Hello, my name is Ben Gilbert. I'm a volunteer lobbyist with the Portland DSA. I support this because it has been concerning seeing unbudgeted money pop up. Transparency is important, especially as we face a strained budget where there are so many needs and not enough funds. Thank you. Yield my time.
Thank you.
Hugo Flores. Mark Jackson and Christopher Olson.
Welcome.
Council President and members of the council, my name is Pastor Mark Jackson, representing the board membership of Oasis of Praise in District 3, and also the Coalition of African and African-American Pastors spread abroad the Portland metro area. As I sit and listen, I want to go into prayer, if I be honest, but I just want to underscore the importance of really establishing and strengthening public trust in you all's leadership and decision-making in this present time on this agenda. The community needs to trust its decision makers, its bureaus. I would also underscore the importance of administering a all-bureau audit because these are taxpayer dollars we're talking about while we are trying to grapple with a housing crisis. I want to underscore the importance as these two organizations I represent today, we have administered millions of dollars with city contracts with the Bureau of Housing and also with DAS at the state level. So we're not a novice to the crises and how to administer resources. So as this council reimagines how to disperse these funds, our hope is that there will be some real clear direction to the Housing Bureau to really look at faith-based organizations and houses of worship who often don't get contracts but do tremendous work in the community, specifically Oasis of Praise in District 3 in a service desert where we've been trying to secure $2 million to acquire our property and to renovate, to continue doing what we've done for the past 27 years, including providing housing services from warming centers to temporary housing of those who are unsheltered, to ensure we continue to underscore safe communities. So this is a seminal moment for our city, and the mantle of leadership and humility and grace is upon each of you all. And I hope, as a community, you all be thoughtful and keep this process humanized and not just technical. We're talking about lives. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Christopher Olson is joining us online.
Yeah, hi, good morning, councilors, Council President Dunphy. Just for the record, my name is Chris Olson, and I live in District 2, and I'm a member of the Portland Democratic Socialists of America Housing Working Group, and I'm a tenant advocate. But today I'll be speaking just for myself as one of the many of Portland's frustrated renters. First, I want to say I fully support this resolution. An investigation into the Housing Bureau. We need answers to the burning question as to why that during a housing crisis declared by the city over 10 years ago, that this bureau has sat on the people's money and allowed thousands to be evicted from our streets or failed to provide or build any more affordable housing. At best, this is a broken system in need of repair, and at worst, it's a deliberate sabotage of public sector efforts to ease the burden of housing costs. $35 million or more at this point is not a small sum of money, especially when we are told in a budget crisis where jobs will be lost and programs will be cut. I want the city council not to just merely investigate this matter, but there needs to be a full audit of all the city's finances by a third party, I think before the end of this year. If any other bureaus have mismanaged funds as poorly as the Housing Bureau, an audit should pay for itself many times over. Every nickel and dime needs to be accounted for, or the taxpayers will lose trust in our new form of government, even though this is likely the result of the previous government. Please audit the city's finances and make sure our citizens can trust their government with their money. And I'll end with this. With some of the technical questions that I heard, It sounded like to me some of the council has been councilors are fishing for excuses not to hold this oversight hearing. I'm sorry, but this is what you are elected to do and what you signed up for. And so please do your jobs, and I'll yield the rest of my time. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
That completes testimony.
Okay. Councilor Green.
Thank you, Council President. I'd just like to formally move Green 1, which just amends those dates from the underlying.
Second.
We have a motion and a second on the amendment to update the language of the amendment with dates. Any discussion? Councilor Knoll.
Yeah, I just wanted to get a little more clarity on why exactly 2 weeks. I think it's a fair question to ask how long it would take. We were discussing this in December. There was a little bit longer of a lag than what's being added here. So I just was curious why 2 weeks, why not 1, why not 3? If you could just speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, I think the way that we started with this was like, if you're a member of the public and you do a public records request, there's 2 weeks to fulfill that requirement. And so I think in this regard, if we adopt this today, that's about 2 weeks for the city administrator to gather those records as if it were a public records request. And then 1 week to take those records and put them on one SharePoint site in council operations, and for us to consider. I wanted to like balance this between being responsive to the moment we're in, because we do have a huge public trust risk out there right now, and also providing a meaningful amount of actionable time. So.
Great, thanks.
Thank you. Councilor Smith.
Thank you. So will this data be shared with the public via council ops before we actually do the hearing?
I don't think that it's directed in the resolution that council ops makes this a public-facing portal. When we have the hearing, all this will become public as we talk about this publicly.
Okay. Seeing no one else in the queue, Keelan, can we please call the roll on the amendment? Green 1.
Avalos.
Aye.
Smith.
Aye.
Knoll.
Aye.
Turtle-Guinea.
Aye.
Ryan.
Aye.
Cuyamaline.
Aye.
Murillo.
Aye.
Novick.
Aye.
Stark.
Aye.
Green.
Aye.
Zimmerman.
Aye.
Dunphy.
Aye.
The amendment is approved with 12 yes votes.
Great. Colleagues, we are now in open discussion of the underlying now amended resolution. Councilor Smith, is that a legacy hand? Apologies. Councilor Knoll.
Yeah, I had a question that actually was technical and I forgot to ask it earlier. In the very last, therefore be it resolved, I just wanted to clarify the legislative intent here of whether or not the intent is for the council president to schedule the hearing by the date, or that the council president is to schedule that the hearing will occur by the date.
That's a good question.
I'm glad you caught that. I'm not surprised you did. I think that my intent when we drafted this was probably to get the meeting to be heard no later than March 6th, but if it pleases the body and if we think it gives us a little more time to be practical, I'm willing to read this with any interpretation. Like if he's like, okay, I've identified a meeting by March 6th, I guess that's fine. But I really did want this to be like, we have this hearing by March 6th. If that's too much of a time pressure, then just putting that sort of stage gate for the council president to figure out when that goes in is probably fine for me.
For me personally, I'm good with it being held by March 6th. I'm not trying to argue. I just wanted to be sure that there was clarity. And if the intent was to schedule it, that the date would be confirmed by March 6th, then if we would need to put, I don't think this is going to happen. I want to be clear on that. But if on March 5th, the statement is made that by the council president that we're going to have it in December, right? Like just trying to get some clarity around that. So if your intention as a sponsor is that it's the date that the thing occurs by, I'm good with that. I just wanted that to be clear for interpretation after we adopt it. And if people want more time, we can adjust the date.
I mean, that's my intent.
Okay, that's thank you for clarifying.
Thank you, Councilor Knoll. Councilor Clark.
Thank you, Council President. Colleagues, I really appreciate the discussion that we've had so far, the reminders of what our responsibilities are as a council. It's been very fruitful. And I have consistently wanted a better definition of oversight. And I think that we still need to tease that out in governance. I think that Councilor Koyama Lane is interested in that as well, and we can use some of the material that you put together to do that. But I think we still have a long way to go on what is governance, how we define it. But colleagues, I also want to say that a lot of the information that we're requesting, the questions that you're asking, we've already reviewed all of this in an executive session. And most of it, maybe not all of it, but the bulk of it. And I'm really concerned that it feels punitive to me. I know, despite the assurances of some of my colleagues, that they're not concerned with punishment. And believe me, I worked for a regulatory agency once and you've heard me say, I think it's important to hang people high sometimes, but this is not that kind of a situation. And in fact, the administration has already shown a change since that time. They've already course corrected. So it feels a little punitive to me. And I do believe that, as I said, we need more definition of what oversight is. But we also need to be very sensitive to the fact that we are in a transition. We are still transitioning from an old form of government to a new form of government. And I think what happened was really a legacy of that old form of government. And I guess I don't feel the need to rehash all of that, because I also want to create this new culture, a culture where city employees feel comfortable in coming forward with mistakes or coming forward with errors, knowing that there's no fear of punishment. So I don't feel a guarantee here that this isn't I don't want to say Spanish Inquisition, but that this isn't punitive. That's my concern here. I'll just leave that for other people to discuss. Certainly willing to hear more about that, but I'm very, very interested in how we define oversight and proceeding on that. Thank you, Council President.
Thank you, Vice President Clark. Councilor Novick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I understand the impulse for this, and I'm not going to accuse Councilor Green of being a kangaroo or a wombat or a koala or any other Australian animal. And I expect this to pass. Again, I understand the impulse for it, but I want to explain why I'm going to vote against it. I think this is entirely backward looking. And what I want to know is what steps is the administration taking to ensure that we know and they know what money is available in various pots. And especially, and I've told DCA Beery this directly, I want them to be shouting from the rooftops why this can't happen with the general fund. Because the worst, my big concern about this is that the public is going to think that we don't really have a deficit in the general fund of tens of billions of dollars, and we don't have to cut police, fire, and parks because there's money in the couch cushions. So we need reassurance and explanation as to why that's not going to happen. As far as this resolution, however, to me, there's three questions I think I already know the answer to, and another question which worries me. What happened to the funds? What led them not being spent in previous years? Well, the relevant people didn't know they were there, so that's why they weren't spent. I'm sure that if people had known they were there, everybody always wants to spend money. And the other questions are, what dynamics led to this information not being shared with council? To what degree? And then the fourth is, what degree were decisions made around these funds and what information was or wasn't shared? And I've heard the administration's answer to that too. Their answer is that they didn't share information with council where they didn't know they could trust the information or they had information in a useful form for us to use. I don't think their answer is going to change. And I think they got the message from councilors that we want to know stuff as soon as there is anything to know, even if the information isn't particularly reliable. And as Councilor Green noted, in this latest incident, the budget director called the council president immediately and said, hey, we found some more money. So it seems like the message has been received. One question which we haven't heard addressed in detail, I don't think, is who was aware of the funds? At what point in time was each party made aware, and why was it made aware? And that, for the old folks here is the Watergate question. What did Helmi Historic know and when did she know it? And I'm worried about going down that rabbit hole because I think we wind up necessarily talking about personalities, and I just don't think that, I mean, if somebody had stolen money, obviously we want to know who's complicit in the stealing and, you know, have them arrested. But in this case, I don't know what the value is of the what did Helmi Historic know and when did she know it question. So again, I expect this to pass. I understand the impulse behind it. I will note that I don't see that there's a huge public outcry for this. We had 4 people giving public testimony. But those are my reasons why I'm going to be, I'm sure, in the minority.
Thank you, Councilor Novick. Councilor Murillo.
Thank you, Council President. We did have an executive session on this matter, and I'll be frank, I'll only speak for myself. I don't feel satisfied with the information that we received in the executive session. And I think that this is a matter of public interest and public transparency because Portlanders' tax dollars are being given to us, and we are being asked to be responsible with those dollars and to fund the services that people want and to cut many of the beloved services that we no longer have funding for. Accountability is not a punishment, but we need to know what is going on because it is bonkers to me that we are acting like even if someone under the best intentions whoopsie-doo misplaced $40 million, that is not something the council should look into. That's bonkers to me. We need to know exactly how things ended up that way, even if under the best intentions and the best circumstances that happened, there is clearly a systems issue here. And we are also not talking about, we are talking about highly paid, high expertise staff who are choosing to work in government, which means that we are doing work for the people in the public interest. The requirements for our jobs as people in government is higher than for a job in the private sector because we are serving the public. And that is not an attack for anybody. That is just, we need to change the culture and the expectation threshold here when we are serving the public, from people who are making $300,000 a year at the city to people who are doing frontline work that goes underappreciated. I'm also kind of frustrated, frankly, that we are going to slow things down again. This council body has struggled to put out policy, has struggled to be productive, and we are over a year in office now. We cannot wait for the governance committee to keep going through this process. We need the council body as a whole to make this decision together because it's a process that we're going to be doing for a long time. And the council committee structures are being changed right now under the new council president. So we might not have a governance committee, who knows? And then we'll have a council of the whole, in which case we would be making that decision together anyways. But I think that there is a certain point where you are going to perfect the process through action. The reality is this is the first time our new government body is doing this process. We've never done this before under the new government. And that means that sometimes you have to do it and then you're going to figure out the process as you go along because that's just the way things work sometimes. But this is an urgent matter to me. We are about to enter the budget season. It starts in June, but really we all know that budget season started a few months ago as we're making these decisions. So I don't feel like, as a representative of District 3, that I can make accurate assessments of the budget, of the process, of the dollars before us, and that I can look my constituents in the eye and tell them that I did everything I could to find dollars to fund things so that I didn't have to cut the thing that they cared about if I don't actually trust the process that we have laid out here. So I would really urge my colleagues, we as a council body are very lethargic. We slow things down. We don't get a lot done. I think we need to just do this process. The public deserves to know what's going on, and frankly, so do we as elected representatives.
Thank you, Councilor Murillo. Councilor Ryan.
Thank you, Council President, and thank you for those that brought this item. It's been a good debate so far, and also the testimony was helpful, and I agreed with much of it. I'm a big advocate for oversight. Policy seldom is felt on the ground for a couple of years, So I tend to be very dogged about following them along, so they actually are felt by the good people that live here in Portland. I also want to get to the bottom of this. And this is about the financial controls at Portland Housing Bureau, specifically the rental office. I think that we're missing the boat by not going at it this way. I think an independent audit, which was mentioned by people who testified, of Portland Housing Bureau's financial controls is what I think we should be voting on today. That will build trust. The big picture item of oversight needs more work. This isn't the big picture. This is going at, in my opinion, a microaggression of one incident where there's personalities connected to it. This specific issue, we had an executive committee meeting, which was just mentioned, on the 11th of December. I know that all of us, I think we're all in attendance. And I did receive information at that executive session that allowed me to feel good about the process going forward on this HR issue. This is punitive, in my opinion. It doesn't build trust. This also does not get to the bottom of the recent shoes that have been dropping at the Housing Bureau. An audit gets to the bottom of it. I appreciate the focus that we are putting on this issue. I just hope we can go about it the right way. We need to focus on principles, not personalities. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Ryan. Councilor Green.
Yeah, thank you, colleagues. I just want to speak to the question of whether or not we got our questions answered during an executive session. That executive session, which I won't talk about the contents of it because it was an executive session, but that was narrowly focused on a personnel issue. That was narrowly focused on the matter of the prior PHB director's termination or resignation. That's what the focus of that was on. I did try to ask questions about the timeline that I'm worried about here and I'm concerned about. And as soon as I started to do that, I was shut down by some of my colleagues who said, this is actually a policy discussion. This is actually something outside the bounds of an executive session. If we're to continue to do this, we will be in violation of public meetings law. And so I said, okay, I'm going to pursue a resolution that's very public so we can actually do this. So what we're talking about here is actually a recognition that that this broader consideration is actually beyond the scope of an executive session. And even if we got all of our questions answered inside of that session, the public doesn't. This is for the public. So it's not good enough for the public to say, okay, well, some counselors were told behind closed doors what actually happened here, so it's good. Trust us, because it's not good. They don't trust us. I think that if we're going to go out in the years to come and ask the city of Portland or ask people in our community, residents of the broader metro region to say yes to a new bond or yes to a new tax proposal, they're going to look at us and say, why should I trust you with new money when you're not even willing to engage in very routine and normal oversight practices that other cities do when they have a sort of bicameral system of government? That's what we're trying to do here. And our refusal to do it would be a signal to constituents that we don't take our jobs seriously. And so I just want to make it very clear that when we went into executive session on December 11th, it wasn't about the questions I'm asking. It was about a personnel matter, which we can't talk about here. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Green. Councilor Avalos.
Yes, thank you. I just want to start by saying I definitely agree with the overall notion that we don't want to create a culture of fear, and that is not the intent. And also us doing our jobs to ensure that we have the right information to make the decisions that we need to make requires transparency, requires public visibility. But I think us creating that trust with the administrative branch is doing exactly this, right? Because without that trust, then we're going to continue to encourage fear of talking to us about what's going on. I think ultimately this is also about creating a mechanism for the public to receive the same information that we get. An executive session, as Councilor Green has already described, it wasn't about this in the first place, but even if it was, that is not the proper way to communicate to the public and earn their trust. Because I think at the end of the day, if people are, worried about how the public is perceiving us and how the public might see this as us not being fiscally responsible, as us abdicating our duties for financial stewardship, then we have a duty to correct that record in a visible way and create a plan that's going to ensure that we can minimize these kinds of oversights in the future. So there's a real narrative problem that we have to discuss, especially at a moment when the community, as Councilor Green just stated, does not trust us with dollars, does not trust that we are putting them in the right place. And when $40 million, about $40 million shows up, that creates a real distrust. Ultimately, it's clear, though, regardless of where you're landing on this issue, on this particular resolution, that there is a desire from everybody to set some norms and procedures for our oversight powers. So I definitely am interested in us continuing that conversation. But to me, this is the beginning of that conversation. Passing this resolution is the first step for us to open up that door and then to create a framework from here that we can replicate in the future for how we engage with the administration when we need answers. So I would really encourage folks to see it in that way. I know that there's a lot of questions that are still unanswered, but I don't think we can not answer those questions if we don't move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Avalos. Councilor Pertolkini.
Thank you, Council President. I have a number of remarks I'd like to make, but I do have a question first. Council President, you have run things in a way where we've had different people running different meetings. Who do you intend to have run this? I'm not sure if it's going to technically be a work session or what it will be.
Yeah, with regard to this, I intend to run it since this is our first oversight, and we do not have formally delegated oversight to any of the committees. I intend to oversee it.
Okay, thank you. Colleagues, Councilor Green and I have had a number of conversations over the last year, really, about oversight, and over the last couple of months about this resolution in particular. And as you know, Councilor, I went back and forth before deciding ultimately to join you in attempting to move it forward last year. I agree with Councilor Murillo that oversight is one of the most important things that we do as a body. And while we've had some discussion about us not having delved into how we do oversight, I actually don't think we ever needed to delve into how we do oversight. I think oversight should be something ongoing, something casual. I've said before at this dais that oversight should be part of the normal committee process. We should see its regular use on committee agendas where we hold conversation about how program implementation is going with DCAs and bureau directors, where we talk about what budget spend looks like midway through the year so that where there are bureaus of particular interest, we know how things are going, where we discuss with bureau directors and deputy city administrators as a committee in public what we're hearing from our constituents and what we hope to see from the administrative branch. We should be able to ask for information casually and receive it. I've never had a problem doing that. I know many people here have asked for information and received it over the past year, and that's happened in committees at times, but not often enough. Oversight should not be controversial or adversarial or scary. And we do have given to us through the charter more formal oversight powers. But if our relationship with the administration is healthy, I don't think we should ever have to use it. And if and when we do need it, it should only be after multiple steps of escalation. We start with a casual conversation. An ask for something hard is denied. We go to the press about that refusal to talk. We build the pressure. We send out another invitation to a committee hearing. And only then do we move to a resolution like this. Only after multiple other steps do we even mention the words subpoena. Frankly, I don't actually think the Baltimore model should be our regular model, because I think our relationship with the administration should be one where we have these conversations as a regular part of our work in committees. This resolution is an escalation, and it's one that I don't think we need yet. I don't think we've gone through all the steps, including robust committee work on this process. And to be clear, I don't need to be in every conversation. We are a body with committees, and in agreeing to that, we agreed that we would not each be in every conversation. I also recognize that there's considerable public interest, and there have been an abundance of questions from my colleagues about this topic. And frankly, I am not convinced that if we do anything other than this, those questions will go away. I am not convinced that everybody up here will be satisfied until we move through this process. There are records that do need to be made public. Portlanders deserve to get the full story of what has happened, and I don't see my colleagues leaning into doing that in the way that I think it should be done. But I hope that we can all agree that it should not be done as a punitive exercise. It must be a fact-finding mission so that Portlanders can fully understand the challenges and opportunities of transitioning to a new form of government. And my understanding from what we've heard today from the carrier and from what I've heard in conversations with the council president is that they are committed to this being a fact-finding and transparency process, not a process to find blame, not something that could, as my colleague noted, lead to a disciplinary action that would be wholly inappropriate, not something, not only not something that presupposes wrongdoing, but specifically something focused on improvements and not on finding wrongdoing at all. This should be a process that allows us to improve the work and come away with a better understanding of how our funds have worked in the past, and allow the administration to come away with a better understanding of how we'd like things to work moving forward. That's it. To that end, I actually think the first three questions here can lead us to a discussion where we can make important statements about how this could be better in the future. I'll share, though, that hearing many of my colleagues' questions today, Council President, I'm concerned we won't stick to the questions on the page. I'm concerned we won't have a forward-looking discussion stemming from the answers to those questions. I am concerned this won't be a fact-finding and transparency process. I hope we can stick to it. Portlanders are watching, and I believe our constituents want a process with more oversight, but I do not think that they want the aggressive interrogation that we see at the federal level, where we go after hardworking public employees whose work we should respect. If this becomes that, this process will absolutely lose my support and, frankly, my participation. I think we as a body deserve the chance to prove that we can do this respectfully and that we can create an environment of oversight that is free from fear for our public employees. I am leaning right now toward voting yes to give us that chance, but I hope we all take very seriously the trust that the public has put in us to do oversight and the trust that we will lose if we turn this into a joke. Thank you, Council President.
Thank you, Councilor Pirtle-Guiney. Colleagues, I'll note that it is 12:03. We have 5 additional councilors on the queue, and we have 3 more items to get to today. Councilor Smith.
Thank you. Thank you. I was just thinking about this because not only does this 21 million give us reason for looking a little bit deeper, but I went back a little deeper than that. I went back to the TAO. And in the TAO, there is an exhibit that says 2.449 million was given to the Housing Trust Fund. So we may have to open this up if we pass this. And in that trust fund, that Housing Investment Trust Fund, it was a red. It was like it was in the red for $2.449 million. And so I got to thinking, wow, we just learned that there's $21 million in that trust fund. So how did we owe it $2.449 million? So it's not gonna be just about this 21. When Councilor Murillo says we're not going to be looking for wrongdoing, well, what is malfeasance? what if a housing director we already know, because we passed it, put forward $2.49 million and we paid them another $2.44 million and they actually had a surplus and not a deficit. So I got a problem with that because I already know that that's something that we already did because that's something that the Housing Bureau put forward. And knowing that this is a bigger issue than the 21 million. And I feel like we need to figure out how to get to that point. Because I'm looking, we put $2.449,339 in the TAL for short-term rental funding to the Housing Investment Fund. We paid that, we did that. Because that's what they said, they were in deficit. But really, they were not in deficit. I don't really need this hearing to let me know that they did something wrong. They took $2.449 million from our general fund to fill their fund because they said they had to have a certain amount of money in there. So let me go to the FIN. In the Housing Investment Fund, the managing bureau is the Portland Housing Bureau. The Housing Investment Fund supports the city's housing initiatives, all of which serve to develop or preserve affordable housing in Portland or help low and moderate income individuals to access affordable housing. There are no reserve requirements in this fund. Per financial policy, contingency funds should be used to address reasonable but unforeseen requirements within the fiscal year. There are no minimum or maximum contingency requirements for the Housing Investment Fund. So now that we've level set, we didn't have to give that money to the Housing Investment Fund during the TAL, the $2.449,339 million. So I'm going to ask this of the, you weren't here, City Administrator Raymond Lee. Tell me what this is when we have a bureau who asks for money and I'm looking at it and I can send you, I will forward it to you. They asked for money, said that they were in deficit, but now we find out they got $21 million. What you gonna do about it? Because we don't have to have a hearing. I don't need to wait until March 6th. I need the administration and the executive to act. Because now we know, we don't have to investigate. We got something for sure right here. Somebody needs to tell me something right now. I don't need to go to a hearing. Why did you ask me for $2.449 million when you had $21 million already there? You didn't have a deficit.
Again, Councilor, we are on the topic of the oversight hearing, but not the substance of what the oversight hearing
Well,
was.
what I'm saying is I don't need an oversight hearing because we have something in front of us right now that can be actually dealt with in the city administrator's office, in the mayor's office. We can actually go get a third-party investigator now to look at this entire thing so that it doesn't turn into a kangaroo court, because there are so many issues relating to this and there's so many different asks and requests. And then when I just looked at this, I went back on the TAL and I said, well, we already know we've been due. So there has been some wrongdoing, Councilor Murillo. It's already some wrongdoing done. I see it right here. So, well, somebody did something. They said it's in negative, it's in red. They said they need 2.449. We gave it to them, we voted for it. And we gave it to them already. So that's something that the administration, that's their job. These bureaus report to them. They need to handle this. When things come to their light, they have to deal with it. And I want to give these folks an opportunity to deal with it and tell us what they're going to do about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Smith. Councilor Canal.
Thank you, Council President. I just want to start by saying one thing here. I imagine that the city administrator, Raymond Lee, is going to be one of the people who's answering questions over the course of this process. And this is more for the public and the media. It'll be tempting or perhaps simply easy to say he's the guy answering the questions and connect that with an assumption that he'd be explaining what he did. But I want to state up front here that the administrator started a month ago. And I'd ask that those covering this in media or even just talking about it on social media understand that the problem we're talking about predates the tenure of actually not just him, but just about everybody up here. And that's part of trying to create a culture where people feel comfortable coming up and saying this problem happened, let's fix it together with council as early as possible. Because if we, and by we I don't mean just this side of the dais, but the entire city, end up lazily blaming the person answering the questions, we're gonna not do right by all of our employees, in particular our most prominent employee at the city. I also want to double down on something Councilor Green said and point out that this is a tactic we've seen in this building quite a bit. When there are two ways to do something and someone chooses one way to attempt it, they're told this isn't the right way, do it the other way. And then when they try the other way, the same people say, this isn't the right way, do it the first way. Councilor Green did ask questions in the executive session and was told that ORS 192.660 didn't allow for those questions in that executive session on December 11th. And by the way, I agree with that interpretation. But then when it's said here that this should be covered in the executive session, it starts to feel like it's not a real argument at all, but instead just the status quo telling people to let it go. Taxpayers aren't letting this go. The public broadly isn't letting this go. And because of that, I don't think we should let it go. Another example, by the way, is when someone suggests a change to the structure of an oversight board, they're told you have to bargain this first. And then when they try to then ask the city attorneys to start bargaining on it, the response is you can't start to bargain until you have the policy. And while that's on another topical area, I think it's relevant here because of the exact thing that Councilor Murillo said. Accountability is not punishment, but it is often perceived as such. I also want to disagree with the idea that oversight should be done in committee, though I do think it should start informally and escalate. I have philosophical and practical disagreements about doing it in committee. Philosophically, sometimes you just do need more formalized processes, and only 5 of us shouldn't be able to do oversight on housing just because we're the only ones on the committee when it is among the most prominent topics that we hear about in our community. As for practically, committees just don't have the time. And we need to recognize that the full council is the most flexible part from a scheduling perspective of our current system. Council has often gone over, and committees, while they have done so, have only done so for a little bit at a time. Keep in mind that there have been, in the last 4 weeks, people shaming others for committees running over time and simultaneously saying more should be done in committee. This is not a real suggestion. It is a way of saying do less, care about fewer things, and effectively accept the status quo. Well, we have seen what the status quo has gotten us. It has led to some bad outcomes, and it's time to start fixing them. I will say that this is not, if I was building it perfectly from scratch, and I imagine everyone here would agree with it, this is not perfect. No piece of legislation is perfect. I wish we'd had a year of discussions leading up to a process for oversight, but I want to say it's still worth doing because it is a vast improvement on what we have now. This is precedent setting, and this is the right topic to set that precedent with. I am frustrated we didn't get to this conversation before today, and I'm grateful that the sponsors brought it forward now. I'm looking forward to being a part of this process and the conversations that we have. I do think that we may need to expand the scope in the context of what we're talking about, not how we're talking about it, because I do agree with everyone's point that this is not necessarily about wrongdoing. It's not necessarily about any person. And I'll also note that the sponsors of this document are not the people who've been bringing up specific employee names today. And that's really important. These are straw man arguments when you bring up people that might be theoretically targeted by this when nobody else is doing that. The people proposing this have not done that. And so I'd ask that we avoid the straw man and just look at what the document says, because there's nothing in here. I've read the whole thing. I would suggest others do it too. There's nothing in here that actually talks about some sort of sanction or punishment to employees. So I intend to vote yes on this. I intend to help make this successful and look forward to taking it as a precedent and revising it and making it better in the future.
Thank you, Councilor Canal. Colleagues, I put myself in the queue. I want to just very briefly, well, first I want to note it is 12:15. I don't think there's any situation in which we're going to be getting to the last 3 items today. And we will have to come back to that. I want to say I came into this hearing bullish and very supportive, and I have to be honest, I have grown 3 significant worries since this hearing started about whether I think this is the right idea. I will be honest, I am deeply opposed to calling frontline staff to testify before us. I believe that responsibility rolls uphill, and while they may have specific information that is vital for us to know, it is incumbent upon their supervisors to get that information in a way that they can convey it to us. I think that we should not be speaking with anybody below a director level. And it will be incumbent on those directors to get as much information. I will not be supportive of calling any frontline staff to testify before us. I am deeply worried about a line of questioning from this body regarding an HR investigation into the former director. That is a private, internal conversation that we've already started to touch on a little bit too much in this conversation, and it makes me deeply uncomfortable, and I have no guarantees that we won't cross into that line while we are in our hearing. And third, I am worried about this body's ability to not cross those lines with regard to specific questions that are outside of the scope of this investigation. I, at this point, believe that the best option for us would be to hire a private investigator to present this information and someone that we could grill in that capacity. But I will note that that is likely to be very expensive and will not be done by March 6th. Early estimates would probably be that that would be a $50,000 to $100,000 cost and would probably take 1 to 2 months minimum in order for us to accomplish that. My question is to the city administrator. Are there any other deep concerns that you have about how this is framing that the legislative body should be responsive to in order to make sure that we land this? And second, if this does not pass today, because I am not counting votes and I don't have a clear sense of who is voting where, how do you intend to move forward regardless?
I'll start with the second part of this question, and we will have to conduct an audit of the situation. And it's just not this one specific item. We'll be really looking at the city as a whole in the process. We have a ton of restricted funds throughout our city that we want to pay close attention to, and how those dollars are being expensed, or how are they being accounted for as an organization, and how are we using those funds to really move forward the priorities that the city council has overall. That's one component of it. Once we look at this information holistically, typically in a situation like this, there are several different ways to get to the bottom line of what has caused this situation to happen. And in a typical situation like this, I probably more than likely would have done a formal investigation into a matter like this, where we have the opportunity and the time of having a professional come in and truly ask the questions and gather all the information and to produce a report to me as a result of what came out of this investigation, any actions that need to be taken moving forward, what changes may need to be taken place in the organization to ensure that this type of issue doesn't happen again and move forward. That's typically how we would set something up like this from an administration standpoint, and we would schedule a work session or a meeting with the city council to go through those results and then kind of say what is administration actually put into action today, and what will require some time for us to be able to put in place if it requires additional personnel or oversight from that standpoint. From there, we would take direction from City Council if there's anything extra that they would like to see added to this, or they have further follow-up questions as it relates to the results of the investigation. But typically, that would be the normal format for something like this to happen. And the oversight component of it really is that oversight and council asking the questions that came out of the investigation, and, you know, honestly, holding the administration accountable for the things that come out of that investigation and things that we say we were going to move forward with as an organization, and having follow-up conversations with the full body of the city council with where are we in the process of reviewing that information, implementing those recommendations, and what has been the outcomes of those results from the investigation.
Thank you, sir. Councilor Koyama-Lane. And just colleagues, just to be clear, we have 10 minutes and 6 colleagues in the queue.
Thank you, Council President. So it's clear that we have governance work to do, ideally in a collaborative way with our city administrator. We need to explore clearer structures and systems for oversight, and that's long-term work. And as the current chair of the governance committee, I'm committed to doing this work. I think many of my colleagues are also. And it's also clear that community right now is really confused, and many of them are angry. I had a Lyft driver tell me like, that's weird, you guys keep finding money the other day. And I think it makes sense that community is confused and many are angry. Trust is eroded when, we keep uncovering funds. And it's also a good thing at the end of to get more money than to find out we have less. And this is also a perception thing. So the perception becomes that information that they have is incomplete or withheld, and that's not acceptable. That's not what we want the public to be thinking. And I'll say, as someone who is oftentimes uplifting our city staff publicly, encouraging this body to be thinking about, how we're speaking about staff and how we're acting. I'm oftentimes the first one to raise my hand to do work behind the scenes to be like, how can we make sure the executive branch and legislative branch are communicating well? How can I help with labor negotiations? What tours can I go on with different bureaus? I think all of that I can hold true, and also at the same time say that this resolution really matters to a lot of our community members. It matters because it's us plainly saying, we take oversight seriously. We're responding to what the public is demanding: transparency, clarity, accountability around public dollars. And today, right now, we owe the public honesty. We owe them clear accounting of these funds, how they're being used, why they were not identified sooner, how we're going to move forward in a different way. I don't think transparency is optional. I think it's our responsibility. So for me, supporting this resolution is one concrete step towards rebuilding that trust. And it doesn't replace the broader governance obligations that we have, but it does demonstrate that we hear community and that we're prepared to move forward differently.
Thank you, Councillor Koyama-Lane. Councillor Zimmerman.
Thanks, Mr. President. I think this has been a hard topic for me. I think that I've been quite outspoken in previous sessions and iterations about my desire for the city to realign itself into this new form of government more quickly. I think that has been one of the great miss shots over the last 2 years. And so I'm weighing the forcing functions, and I think that this is one of those forcing functions. The oversight is good. Councillor Koyama-Lane brings up important points. The fact that we have random members of our community who are so in tune with the fact of the silliness that is the City of Portland's financial system is deeply concerning. As the finance chair, I issued a letter to you and the mayor yesterday about significant, bold, public change. I still think that change rests within your, as in the mayor's, administrative purview, and you all have a duty for better communication with the council to alleviate a lot of what we're hearing today and over the last several months. But I also, there have been a few people, and I've really appreciated my councilors, colleagues who've brought up just like, how do we encourage the culture that allows problems to be identified without that people being scared of bringing problems forward? For me, that is foundational to this topic. And in a world where I care about the realignment of the system, I want space to be able to exist for that. So in one sense, it's really crummy that over the last few months, we've now had a couple of times where we've, quote, found money under the cushion. At the same time, the fact that all bureaus now work for the same boss is why that's happening. And so that is a good thing, even though it's an embarrassing story. I want more of it to happen. I don't hope that there are $20 million cushions, but I do expect that there are probably others. That goes along with this council has clearly set a signal to the bureaus that the carryover ideas are changing. The old method is changing. The clarity of your budget in this budget season is changing. And I admit that that's going to take a while to implement. And so I think a lot about how we encourage that culture to be a thing. I also don't know that this resolution will be accomplished without doing what the council president indicated about going into that line level. My questions to the city attorney were not delay tactics. They are quite literally my biggest concern issues around how will an employee show up if they get the, the letter from the city council. And that idea to me is very concerning. And I think that that could be a point in our existence as a body. I am not there. I am not to the point where I think this can only be fixed with some sort of inquiry in a public setting that I think will lead to employee-based disciplinary investigations. So I have a lot of concern for that. And when Councilor Green told me about this resolution, it was before the executive session, and I indicated that I was somewhat open to the idea. After that executive session, I have been immediately closed to the idea. The feeding frenzy that I saw happen during that executive session is what makes me believe to my core that this would be an experience that the city council cannot recover from. I think we would be well within the city's right to send a charter amendment forward to correct the city council if we endanger, frankly, the city government with whatever this could be. That feeding frenzy is not something I'm going to support, because I don't think we will stop at directors. I don't think we will stop at DCAs. I think that this will do the opposite of creating a culture where it's okay to raise the flag and say, I think I've found something that was a problem. It will actually say, I'm scared to death that I found something that was a problem, and I don't know how to raise it until you figure out whomever's got the best relationship to bring it forward. And that's not a system, that's a broken culture to me. I wish it wasn't so. I also think that the mayor and the administrator do owe us some more information and more how you gonna fix it talk, but I'm not to the point of being able to support this resolution today. And I hope that if this does pass, that the administration very much consider how we prepare employees before they have to come in front of this body, because I am concerned that we will, like I said, create a system that's hard to recover from. I've thought through some things that I thought I might be able to propose as amendments that would change it. I just don't think that that's there. I think this is tenuous enough, and it's a live wire enough that I think it would be better for the city council to walk away from this resolution. We have shown our frustration. We have shown our deep and serious misgivings about how this has occurred. And I do think that what I'm hearing from the CFO, from the CBO, from the city administrator, and from the director of the Housing Bureau is that they are still figuring out what the path forward is, but that they are on the path, that they want to be on the path, and that's important. If they were telling me that they think that this is a problem made up in city councilors' heads only, I'd take a different approach. But I don't think that they're denying that there is a concern. And because of that, I think I've got teammates that can get us to the goal line. And so I'm not prepared to support this. And Councilor Dunphy, President Dunphy, I appreciate some of the points that you brought up, because you said it better, I think, in a lot of ways of where some of my great concerns exist. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Zimmerman. Councilor Novick.
One of the questions thank you, Mr. President. One of the questions this resolution says we were going to ask is, who is aware of the funds? At what point in time was each party made aware? You cannot answer that question without talking about individuals. I raised the name Helmi Historek as an example of an individual of whom that question would definitely be asked. I can name a few others of whom we would definitely be asked that question if we pass this resolution. If we pass this resolution with that question, then we'll also have to ask, what did Michael Jordan know and when did you know it? What did Donnie Oliveira know and when did you know it? What did Jonas Beery know and when did you know it? What did Keith Wilson know and when did he know it? That is not a straw man argument. That is a natural, automatic consequence of passing this resolution with that question. And I think it has to be an intended consequence as well.
Thank you, Councilor Novick. Councilor Knoll.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point, what Councilor Novick is saying here. My earlier comment was not about the bringing up of the name as a point of conversation, but about the idea that it's targeted in a punitive sense. Right. And I think that's not a comment that you were making. I wasn't referring to your prior comment there, Councilor Novick. I do want to respond to something, to the points that the council president raised, and say that I agree with the concerns you raised, but I also think that these are not things that this document does. They're things that could theoretically go wrong, but which there are guardrails against. And unlike for the other 11 of us, actually, you are actually the guardrail in many of these particular cases as council president. I think it's fair to say, and I'm also opposed to calling in frontline staff to testify. As a presiding officer, you can avoid that. I think we all agree that there's somewhere that there needs to be a horizontal line in the org chart below which we're not bringing in people to come in. We could say it's DCAs or directors or deputy directors or somewhere in there, and maybe we'd all differ on where exactly we draw it, but I think conceptually there's an agreement there. If that needs to be written in, we can amend that in. But I also think that would resolve some of Councilor Zimmerman's question around employee protections, which, by the way, are good questions and worth exploring the answers to. Secondly, you mentioned not wanting an HR investigation into the former director. I think I just covered that. It's not part of the conversation if we need to adjust what we're talking about here. But I think there's a pattern that we see sometimes, and it's borne out in statistics, shout out to Rose City Reform, about whether or not we're going to just vote no on something or actually try to improve it in this body. And if there's a concern, these seem like a relatively minor thing to adjust language on that. Third, you said you were worried about the body's ability to avoid crossing the lines, and this is a very long code reference. It's 3.02.040.B.1.B.6. The council president, quote, ensures councilors confine themselves to the question under debate and refrain from personal criticism, end quote. So in that case, you are also the guardrail if you're presiding over this. And I'll also note that you said that you'd prefer to hire a private investigator to present this information, and that could be someone that we could grill in that capacity. I agree with that preference. I also agree with your assessment that we don't have the money budgeted for it or the time by March 6th. I think we don't need the perfect to be the enemy of the good. And we can, if this process continues or if there are future oversight hearings, we might need to talk about, and I think the time constraint would be resolved by that. But philosophically, we can't have oversight require us, especially of lost or found money, require us to find more money to use for the oversight, because otherwise we'll never use this piece of the charter. And I think that that's not just about the big picture of hearings, which I, by the way, agree with Councilor Pertle-Guinea about not wanting this to be like Congress, but about even the sort of midpoint of that formal to informal scale that Councilor Green is talking about. So I guess what I'm trying to say is there are theoretical things that could go wrong. And there's a question of how each of us speculates whether they would or wouldn't. But I think I have faith that whoever is presiding over this, if brought in early by the council president, or if it is the council president, as it would be in this case, would have a knowledge of what the things we're trying to avoid are, and would have the empowerment under the structures that we have and the rules that we already have to exercise that authority and avoid those problems. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Canal. Colleagues, it is 12:33. I have asked our staff to stay a little long so we can finish this item, and I am desperate to try and get the appointments that were pulled from the agenda also done today. We will not be hearing our item on the ABC code. We will be having that first thing tomorrow. Councilor Smith.
Thank you, Council President. I was thinking about some of the things that the former council president said, and Council Zimmerman. I think we can, call upon the administration and the mayor to look into this, because we haven't done that. We haven't asked them to do anything. And so we need to give them an opportunity, and they haven't spoken out about this yet, about the $21 million. And I think we need to give them the opportunity to correct this and give us an understanding of what's happening and what's going to happen going forward. But I don't know that I will be voting in support of this. I am a big proponent of oversight, but I think until we actually get some rules of engagement at oversight, I don't want to put this out there yet. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Smith. Councilor Pertle-Guinea.
Thank you, Council President. May I ask a question of the City Administrator?
Absolutely.
City Administrator Lee, there are a number of pieces of information that this resolution asks you to produce. Presumably, you know what those all are, where they lie. We could get to them rather quickly. If we were to ask for those pieces of information outside of this resolution, would your intent be to get those to us in a timely fashion?
Yes, it would be. And it may be one of those situations I feed you information as I get it. Because even within, a normal open records request, we would have a certain amount of time to get information in, but that's also taken into consideration where those different outlets of information may be coming from. If we're looking at personal devices where we have to go through people's hard drives, and once we figure out who all hard drives we have to go through, that may extend some of that time frame to get that information. But we would start sending those batches of information over as we got them, and it may extend past that normal time frame. But we would still, it really depend on where we're trying to gather that information from.
If this doesn't pass today, I don't know what the vote count is. If this doesn't pass today, would you be willing to still get us this information by February 20th?
Yes, I will still be committed to doing that.
Okay. I'm not sure if our CFO is still in the room.
Yes, he is.
I was hoping, do you mind if we call him up?
Please,
Thank
come on
you,
up.
Council President.
Welcome back, Jonas.
Mr. Bieri, are the funds, not the 20.7 million, but the more recent funds that you've shared some information with us about, are any of those funds eligible for use for paying for an outside auditor?
Again, for the record, Jonas Beery, Chief Financial Officer. That's a great question, Counselor. I don't know. We're doing due diligence on the flexibility around those other funds. That's one of the outstanding questions we want to get pinned down before we get back to you, but I will add that to the list to due diligence, and that information will be returning to you ASAP this week.
Okay, I think the Council President said that an audit would be somewhere between $50,000 and $100,000.
I was looking at an investigator.
Or an investigator?
Yeah.
Is that about the amount, City Administrator, that you would expect to pay if we asked for an audit?
Yes, for an audit itself, investigation may vary depending on the attorney that we use and their hourly rate. That may vary, but if you're looking at an actual audit of it, that's close to it.
Okay, and do we have, I was thinking, I'm sorry, about those newly discussed funds, because they are related to what we're talking about here, and presumably, though we're still waiting to find out, not fully allocated to other uses. If those funds weren't available, are there other funds that would be available for an audit like this, Mr. City Administrator or Mr. CFO?
I would say we'd have to find the funds to do that. And that's something that we've already had conversations about, moving down that direction and really trying to find funds that we could earmark for a project like this. And it goes into a bigger question of us looking holistically at our system of our different financial funds that we have, and ensuring that we have a schedule of how we may be looking at evaluating and auditing those funds as well.
Understood. I think what I'm hearing is probably we could find it, but you can't give me a guarantee today that those funds or any others would be available, which I was hoping we would have something a little bit stronger than that, but I'm hearing a lean yes, but not a for sure yes, I think.
I think when we look at the questions that are being asked of this city, we have to be able to find those funds to be able to do that, to bring back the credibility and trust from the public as it relates to how these dollars are being expensed, and we have to be able to find those funds to be able to do that due diligence.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. CFO. Council President, part of our public meetings law means that we don't always get to iterate before we're up here. We don't always know where people are. And sometimes that means we inadvertently are forced into a position of putting our colleagues on the spot. And I apologize that I'm going to do that right now. I share all of the concerns that you mentioned about how this process would go. You said it, I think, much more succinctly than I did. And while I know that some of our colleagues have said you can prevent that, I also, having presided over this body, know that you can't always prevent that with this body. And I heard you say that you would prefer an audit. If you would truly prefer an audit, I am offering to work with you and our administration to find the funds for an audit, perhaps pause this process and give the opportunity for us to figure out if we can use some of those housing dollars to do this differently. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but we don't have other opportunities to hear each other say these things and to put those offers out there.
And before you answer, Council President, I just want to say that I was going to make a case about why it's important for the council body to use our powers for this specifically. If you'd like to hear that before making an answer.
I will just respond very briefly by saying I am intent on getting this information out in a way that the public can have it. I'm indifferent to the vehicle. I am inclined to support my colleagues at this point, but I have deep concerns about not only the things that I raised, but also my ability to prevent some of those lines from being crossed candidly.
Council President, I don't think we have time for amendments right now.
Probably not.
If we did, I might propose that we take the body's temperature by voting on an amendment, because I don't know where people would be about keeping the information gathering pieces in here, removing the last resolved with the hearing, and instead saying, be it further resolved that the city administrator identify funds for an audit no later than X date. I don't think we have time for that right now. So I'm not going to propose that, but if there is a way to have more time for this, I don't know what the body's temperature would be on something like that.
I'm also not sure. Councilor Murillo.
Thank you, Council President. I fear that this body is going to engage in a dereliction of our duties out of fear of not being Portland polite. That's what I'm hearing right now, because the charter inherently gives us the power to do investigative oversight, and I don't know why there is such immense queasiness about using the powers that the charter has delegated to us to do the work that we were elected to do. Section 2-109, titled Investigations, says that in aid of its legislative function, the council or a committee of the council duly authorized by it may investigate any board or department of the city government and the official acts and conduct of any city officer, employee, or agent, and for the purpose of ascertaining facts in connection with such investigation. It goes on, I won't read the whole thing. That is our authority under charter, which the public voted for and that we were elected to do. So we can be fact gatherers and finders. And I think the fact that we are terrified of having to find $100,000 to find an independent investigator means that we don't have money, which means that it's even more important that when $40 million goes missing and then we find it, that we figure out how the heck that happened. No? $100,000 should be a drop in the bucket in a multi-billion-dollar budget or in a billion-dollar budget, but it's not, because we are in such dire straits. So while there is space for us to hire a third party to do some of this work, the charter actually asks us to exercise that muscle. It asks us to become experts in this process. We have an opportunity to strengthen our authority, our information gathering, our ability to serve the public transparently, and we are just choosing to abdicate that duty because it is uncomfortable, is what I'm hearing. And we are in an inherently uncomfortable role in what is possibly the most uncomfortable time to be a representative of the public in office. So we have to lean into our authority, our duty to look into this and establish the facts. I think that there is an inherent hypocrisy too, that we should look into this. The accusation about personalities was thrown in. I have no idea what that's all about. What I know is that my constituents are also asking me why we keep finding millions of dollars that are missing. And we cannot allow Portland polite and our queasiness and discomfort over what is a very concerning situation to prevent us from doing our duties. So the charter outlines this very clearly, and we have a responsibility to vote and do this. The administration has already stated that they can do this, and we have a responsibility to act in response. So I really hope that this goes through today. I hope that we will shorten our discussion and that we will move to a vote to get the ball rolling on this, because We cannot keep waiting when we're already in budget season. We are about to have community listening sessions where we are going to have the community come and testify to us and tell us which precious thing they want to cut. We owe it to them to tell them how we plan to be responsible with their dollars. And we also have to have an expectation that high-level, high-ranking city employees who are in charge of these funds are also responsible for those dollars. That is not a witch hunt. That is the basic responsibility of your job as a public servant, especially when you are high level, especially when you are well paid. We have a high threshold of responsibility that we owe to the public. And this, to me, is purely fact-finding. We need to know what happened. And I'm going to emphasize again, if Councilor Green has brought up alternatives, was asking questions during executive session, and he was told to stand down and not ask those questions, and then he is bringing forward a proposal that allows us to ask these questions in the ways that we were told we have to, and now we are being told we can't do that again, then how exactly are we as a legislative body supposed to get the answers we need about the budget to make decisions on behalf of the public? I cannot vote on a budget without all of this information. So do not engage in a dereliction of your duty because of Portland polite discomfort around finding $40 million under the couch cushions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Maria. Councilor Green.
Colleagues, I'll be brief. I just want to make 2 points here. The suggestion that we should rely upon an independent investigator or auditor, I understand the appeal, but frankly, that's the approach we took last year when we approached the Zenith oversight question, because I think at that time, even I was a little bit apprehensive about invoking the Section 2, 109 sections of the charter that put council into a formal oversight capacity, especially when we're so new as a body. And so what we did as a compromise, we said, well, we'll have the city do this. We'll trust that the city administrator can set this up. And they set that up, and if we were found that there were conflicts of interest inside of that own determination. And so at the suggestion of myself and Councilor Murillo, who were the carriers of this resolution primarily, the mayor said, okay, fine, I think it's a good idea actually to find some money for an independent investigator. That's still underway, and that's not even done. And so I think what's going to happen here, colleagues, if we don't pass this and we say, well, we'll maybe do it down the road with an independent investigator, is it will take us many months to identify the money. It will take us maybe as long as that to identify a contractor. It will take us a long time to get through procurement. And by the time that we have signed a contract to do whatever that investigation looks like with a scope, we will be past the next budget. We will have gone through a budget setting process where we will have to have closed $120 million of a deficit. So those are the stakes. And I think if we don't pass this today, I hope you're all prepared to go out and talk to your constituents in a public and say, I didn't think it was necessary to step into our oversight power on this one. I'm just going to go ahead and say this is behind us. I'm going to trust us. It's just $21 million. It's not that big of a deal. Let's just move forward. We can figure out how to deal with it the next time, because I don't think for the public there's a next time on trust. I really don't. I think that we've lost that. And on the question of creating a culture, making sure we don't create a culture of fear, I'm actually really worried that there's already a culture of fear inside of the city executive apparatus all the way down to the rank and file. What I hope that this process is able to daylight is whether or not individual employees were ever told that they shouldn't bring information to council, were ever told that they shouldn't communicate something that they found because it might be embarrassing for the city. We have one person's account saying that that's what she was told. But I don't know if that's true, because I haven't seen the full record. And until we're willing to go and engage in that record, we're gonna continue to have lingering out there a suggestion by a former bureau director saying, I was told not to tell council about this because it's bad PR. And colleagues, if we're gonna let that stand without looking at the record ourselves and saying, you know what, that's actually a misstatement, at no point were staff ever told to keep this quiet, then what we were basically accepting is to say that sort of suggestion is completely acceptable in this city. And I don't think it is. So I'm very concerned that we're not going to pass this, and that 6 months from now we're going to have a city government that's going to say, great, you're adopting a new budget and you never dealt with the prior lapse in the previous budget, and you never dealt with the fact that during the mid-year budget adjustment process, you thought it was acceptable to not be told about $21 billion, or at least $12 million during that. So those are the stakes, colleagues. We can't outsource our duty to some third-party private contractor. We have to do this ourselves.
Thank you, Councilor Green. Councilor Pertolgini.
Council President, I'm sorry. I know you're trying to wrap us up. Since I last spoke, two things happened. One is I was told by one of my colleagues that if we don't pass this, we are saying we can't ask questions and derelicting our duties. And I want to be really clear that I think there are a lot of different ways that oversight can be done. There are ways that I think oversight should have been done this year that nobody with a gavel did, a committee gavel. So I don't appreciate being told at the dais that we are derelicting duties if we have different views on how oversight should happen. I've also heard a desperation to use a specific type of oversight that makes me really uncomfortable. The second thing that happened is that the city administrator said to me there are funds available if we want to do an investigation or some sort of audit that's within our ability as the administrative and the legislative branches and doesn't step on the toes of the auditor. I think there are ways we can do that. So I apologize, Mr. President, but I am going to propose an amendment to see where council is at. And I would propose that we delete the final "be it resolved" and replace it with language that says, "Be it resolved that council directs the city administrator to begin an investigation or audit of finances at the Portland Housing Bureau so that we have full information along with the records that have been requested." I would entertain a second.
There's been an amendment moved by Councilor Pertolgini. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Councilor Novick by a hair. Colleagues, discussion on the amendment. Are folks in the queue to the amendment? Councilor Canal.
Yeah, I guess I was in the queue to talk about this idea of an audit, and then it became relevant to the amendment. Has anyone talked to the auditor? Because given that Councilor Green brought up the Zenith resolution, that was a conversation that happened in the Zenith resolution as we use the word audit, and we do have a 14th elected official in this government that we don't talk enough about and the importance of that role. But
She said no. She said no.
she said no in Zenith, or she said no about this one?
Zenith.
Yeah, okay. So I don't know if anyone's asked her on this one, and I think she had the right to say no, by the way. That's written into the charter, the way we've set up our government. And so I think that might be it's possible that would happen again. I don't want to speak for the auditor, but I don't think anyone should until we've asked that office. So I don't support that. And the other piece of it, again, because Councilor Green brought up the Zenith resolution, is that hasn't happened yet. And so it's not that I don't think that doing an investigation is a good idea. I do. It's that the idea of replacing it with, replacing the final "be it further resolved" with that seems to me to leave a pretty big gap. And I will say that I'm open to a later, outside the scope of this document, conversation about how oversight could be done in the committee context, but it will require council president saying yes to requests for more time when those come up. And that's a thing that just hasn't happened so far. So I would love to have that conversation outside of the scope of this document, hopefully after we pass this document.
Thank you, Councilor Canal. Councilor Murillo to the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to be honest, I have no idea what casual oversight means, because that is not defined. That means you could ask a question, maybe you'll get an answer, maybe you won't, maybe there will be proof of that answer, maybe there won't be. That doesn't mean anything. What does mean something is the power that is outlined for us in the charter about what council can do. And we do not have to continuously outsource our legislative power to somebody else. City Administrator, I think you are fabulous. I fully trust that you would carry this out extremely well. There is no question of that in my mind. The question is why my colleagues feel like we shouldn't do what is, again, explicitly within our power to do, when it applies to the entire city. The reason this should not just go to a committee with 5 people is because we are the budget authority. We have the power of the purse, all of us. There is $40 million on the line. I don't understand how this is not a matter of urgency for my colleagues when we keep telling the public that we have to cut things. It is a dereliction of our duty as the people who have the power of the purse, as the people who are outlined to do investigations, as the people who are answerable to our districts and to our constituents when that parks bathroom gets cut, when we have less police officers on our streets, when we have to close a firehouse. If we are scrounging for the thought of getting $100,000 for an independent investigation, then we have even more of a responsibility to figure out where that money went. So we need to direct the collection of information and the conversation surrounding it. It's great if the administration and the executive side want to provide information to us. That's wonderful. Having a fluid conversation is great. But this is for the benefit of the public. And I genuinely feel that there is a crisis happening right now for our institutional legitimacy as a newly founded council. We are a year into this. It is time to exercise our muscles, and that muscle also includes oversight. So I don't think doing this more casually is beneficial at this time. We have seen what a casual response gets us, and a casual response gets us a few months down the line finding another roughly $15 to $20 million that we have no idea where it was spent. That is not any way for us to be able to make budget decisions in the months to come. It's just not possible. So I really hope that we will vote this through today. We need the hearing. We need public information. We need all of this to be cleared up. And we should make no assumptions as a legislative body who will be reviewing the information that comes before us before it comes to us. But when that information comes to us, then we will have to make decisions. There will be authority about what happens. And we are representatives of the public, of the people who are giving us their tax dollars first and foremost. So I really hope that this council will take the oversight of these dollars more seriously. And it's not something that can be casual, and it's not something that can be done in committee. It has to be done with the entire council.
Thank you, Councilor Maria. City Administrator, I didn't put my hand up in the queue, but I was intending to ask. To this amendment specifically, could you give me a little could you clarify for us about timing, cost, available expenses, et cetera?
From a timing perspective, we can run this pretty quickly, and we could run on a contract through our city attorney's office to get this done faster than our normal typical procurement process that we would take this through. From a financial standpoint, not sure. It depends on the company that we choose, but there is money through the city, and potentially could be the Housing Bureau that we could use to actually do this audit or investigation of these funds. And what I would also say to the City Council as well, we still have the option to coming back to this full body once this audit and report is done, and report back to this full body the results of the audit or the investigation. So everyone in this council can have that information, and it can be discussed in an open forum as well. There may be some attorney-client privilege in this, and our city attorney will navigate us through that component of it if we need to go into any executive session to discuss a component of it that is attorney-client privilege. But my objective in this would be to come back to the full council to debrief them on the results of the audit and investigation.
Thank you, sir. Councilor Smith.
Councilor Murillo, you gave me something to think about, because you talked about the 41 million. If we're only going to be talking about the 21 million and not the 15 or 20 million, I don't know that I can totally support this, but I think if we're going to talk about it, we need to talk about it fully. If we're going to have this oversight hearing, we need to talk about everything. So if we're not talking about everything and we're only going to do the 21 million, I don't know how I can vote for it. And we can put a amendment on the table to do the 15 to 20 million or 30 million plus, because I've been told several numbers.
May I just direct? Counselor, I think that's an important stance to take as you go into this. We have to ask the questions that encompass or get a handle around the broader scope of the big problem, and that includes the new information. I would just say that the underlying resolution that I proposed doesn't stop us from expanding on the nature of whether or not, in the course of your own self-correction of the $21 million, what practices have you put in place, for instance, that have led to the discovery of the new money? I don't see this as mutually exclusive. So I think if you supported the underlying, it gives you plenty of space to have the dialogue around the full set of money. That's just my view on it.
Thank you.
Okay. Seeing no one else in the queue, Keelan, can we call the roll on the amendment? Pertogini 1. Yes.
Avalos.
No.
Smith.
No.
Canal.
No.
Pertogini.
Aye.
Ryan.
Aye.
Liamalane.
No.
Murillo.
No.
Novick.
Aye.
Clark.
Aye.
Green.
No.
Zimmerman.
No.
Dunphy.
No.
The amendment fails with 4 yes votes and 8 no votes.
Colleagues, seeing no one else in the queue, and I believe most folks have talked at least once, if not twice, are we ready to move to a final vote on the underlying resolution? Keelan, can you please call the roll?
Avalos.
Aye.
Smith.
Aye.
Canal.
Aye.
Pertogini.
With the hope that we live up to our best selves, aye.
Ryan.
No. No.
Liamalane.
Aye.
Murillo.
Aye.
Novick.
No.
Clark.
No.
Green.
Aye.
Zimmerman.
No.
Dunphy.
Aye.
The resolution as amended is adopted with 8 yes votes and 4 no votes.
Thank you, colleagues. Colleagues, I'd like to ask unanimous consent to adjust our agenda to move the 2 items that were removed from the consent agenda bring those 2 items forward. And we will be moving, I'd like to move item 11 to the top of tomorrow's afternoon session. Do I have unanimous consent to adjust the agenda as such? Seeing a lot of nods and hungry faces, Keelan, can we call the items that have been called? Do we read them separately or do we read them? Okay.
Yeah,
please.
we'll read them separate. Okay, this is item 7, appoint Teresa Carr to the Home Forward Board of Commissioners for a term to expire February 4th, 2030.
Thank you. Do we do staff presentations on these? No. Oh, because it came off consent, we do not do a staff presentation. Colleagues, is there any discussion?
Council President, did you want me to do my chair report
That
of
would be
it though?
perfect. That'd be great.
Great.
Thank you.
We're on Teresa Carr, right?
Yes.
Okay. So this resolution appoints Teresa Carr to the Home Forward Board of Commissioners to fill a vacant seat. Portland City Council approval is required by state law for these appointments, and filling the seat ensures that the board can maintain their quorum and continue making timely decisions. There was no financial impact, and this was heard and approved unanimously in committee. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Councilor Pertogini.
Thank you, Council President. May I ask a question of the chair?
Absolutely.
Councilor Avalos, was there any conversation with this appointee about some of the concerns council has expressed with Home Forward, including the number of people in apartments, the security concerns that have been raised at many of the buildings, and the living conditions in some of those buildings?
There was some discussion with this appointee about that, and obviously the item wasn't to enumerate on those issues, but they were raised so that she was aware. I can't remember what she said, but she gave her feedback on that, and that was of importance to her. She served on the board.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I have some significant concerns that I have heard from constituents about security in at least one, and I believe multiple home forward buildings in my district. And I appreciate that you all took the time to ask questions about those things.
For the record, I asked those questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Ryan, for representing our district in that way.
Councilor Canal.
Yeah, actually, before I comment, Councilor Ryan, can you say a little bit more about what the responses were to those questions?
It was limited because of the scope of the conversation. I think my intent was to daylight them. On the spot at this moment, I can't recall. I'd have to go back and look. So I'm not going to take more time in this meeting to bring up exactly what the responses were.
That's fair.
What was important is that we were transparent about the fact that it has been reported, highly reported, and we needed transparency when we were on this topic.
Thanks. So at this dais, I brought up Louisa Flowers. I know my colleagues in District 2 have brought it up as well. We've also talked, and many folks up here have brought up the 1 in 7 units being vacant in home forward properties, and that this is something we absolutely have to address. And these two things are interrelated, right? One of the major reasons why we see, it's not the only reason, but one of the major reasons why we see vacancies in home forward is the feelings related to safety. I asked the mayor, and the mayor agreed to come with me on a tour of home forward. I guess in absentia would ask if the home forward board would be willing to come do that. I'll also note that this morning there was a article in Willamette Week around the Dawson Park apartments, which I've also been hearing about. I was at the Elliott Neighborhood Association a little while ago, last week, and that came up there as well, the issues around that particular home forward property. The title of today's article is "A Drug Market Moves into a Home Forward Apartment Building." So there are some significant issues there. I'm not going to vote. I would never, because of the way this structure is set up, Gresham gets to appoint who they want, and we're going to vote yes on it, is how I view it, to honor that agreement. But I was hoping to have the opportunity to ask for people to come and see it for themselves with me, and to come and form an opinion based on firsthand knowledge. And I'll invite anyone who's interested in doing that, from the press, from the council, from the Home Forward Board, to come see these particular properties and see what we can do about it, because it's unacceptable. That has nothing to do with Teresa Carr. She seems highly qualified. It's nothing to do with the appointment process, which I would normally ask questions about, but because Gresham has this authority, I won't be questioning them on that. I want to honor that agreement, but I do think it's worth taking the opportunity to daylight that and again ask, and I hope, feel free to reach out if you're hearing this, anybody on that side of it, to reach out to my office, and I'd be happy to bring you along on our tour with the mayor and I. Thanks.
Thank you,
Councilor Call.
Great. Colleagues, seeing no one else in the queue, Keelan, can we please call the roll?
Avalos.
Aye.
Smith.
Aye.
Null.
Thank you for being willing to serve. Aye.
Guinea.
Aye.
Ryan.
Aye.
Cleameline.
Aye.
Murillo.
Aye.
Novick.
Aye.
Snark.
Aye.
Green.
Aye.
Zimmerman.
Aye.
Dunphy.
Aye.
The resolution is adopted with 12 yes votes.
Keelan, can we please call item number 8?
Appoint and reappoint members to the Building Code Board of Appeal for terms to expire February 3rd, 2029.
Thank you. Did this also go through the Housing Bureau? Yeah. Councilor Avalos.
Great. Yeah, so this is a confirmation for appointments and reappointments to the Building Code Board of Appeal. The board plays an important role in hearing building code appeals and ensuring safety while allowing flexibility when alternative approaches meet the intent of the code. This is 2 new appointments and 3 reappointments, filling all of the positions on the board through February of 2029. And it was passed unanimously out of committee. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor. Colleagues, any questions or discussion? Pausing for a second. Seeing no one, Keelan, can we please call the roll?
Yeah, Council President, this is a report, so we'll want to make a motion.
I need a motion and a second.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilor Avalos, seconded by Councilor Guinea. Can we now take the roll?
Yes, thank you. Avalos.
Aye.
Smith.
Aye.
Aye.
Canal,
Aye.
Bertolini,
Aye.
Ryan,
Aye.
Koyama Lane,
Aye.
Murillo,
Aye.
Novick,
Aye.
Clark,
Aye.
Green,
Aye.
Zimmerman,
Aye.
Dunphy.
Aye.
The report is accepted with 12 yes votes.
Item number 11 will be heard at the beginning of our meeting tomorrow. It is a first reading of a non-emergency ordinance. We are adjourned until then?
Recess.
We are recessed until then. Thank you.